Greetings from the Alexandrina Council. Let's meet the driving force behind the Alexandrina community. Chief Executive Officer, Andrew MacDonald. Mayor, Keith Parks. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Peter Oliver. West Ward, Councillor Bill Coomans. Councillor Lou Nicholson. Councillor Michael Scott. North Ward, Councillor Craig Maidment. Councillor Sue Miller. Councillor Christy Thornton. South Ward, Councillor Margaret Gardner. Councillor Millie Livingston. And finally, Councillor Peter Oliver.
Welcome to our council meeting of Monday the 17th of March 2025. An audio recording of the meeting will be made for minute-taking purposes and will last the length of the open meeting. The audio file will be available on the council website after the draft minutes have been circulated. I'd like to welcome our elected members. There are no apologies or leave of absence. I'd also like to welcome our Chief Executive Officer, Andrew MacDonald, our General Manager Community, Stacey Batson, Acting General Manager Infrastructure, Lee Graham, and our General Manager Corporate, Tash Hunt, and some of our other staff who are here as required. Would you all stand to acknowledge traditional owners and the local government prayer? The Alexandrina Council and its communities acknowledge the Ngarrindjeri, the Paramank and the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of our council district. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to grant Thy blessing upon the works of this council. Guide us in our deliberation for the advancement and the true welfare of the people of this district. Thank you. Remind council members, if you have an interest in a matter which will be before council at this meeting, you're asked to disclose the interest to the council and provide full and accurate details of the relevant interest at the beginning of the meeting, and also reminded you must also declare that interest and provide details at the time the relevant item arises for consideration. Councillor Livingston's advised of a conflict at 3. So, item 2 is the confirmation of minutes. There are minutes from 7 different committees. You're happy to do them all at once? Around the one by one. So all in favour, those in favour of doing them all at once?
Councillor Miller doesn't want to do them all.
Or let's see who else wants it first. So who's in favour of doing them all at once? 3. So we'll do them all at once. So the minutes are there. They're only being received and noted. There's no actions from any of them. So is there a mover that we receive and note them? Councillor Oliver. Is there a seconder? Councillor Gardner. Is there any discussion on any of them? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I do have questions on a couple of these minutes. Would you like me to ask them one at a time, or how would you like me to do it? Yeah. So with the Climate Emergency Environment Committee, I see there was a workshop on the 24th of February, I think it was, of a subcommittee, and I just wondered what those outcomes were and if they'll be shared with council members.
Thank you. Through the chair. So the subcommittee workshop progressed some of the council resolutions that the SEEK are working through with administration. I'm not aware of the outcomes being published on the website because it was a workshop. However, I'm sure the team can put a brief summary together and share that on the council members portal.
I had a question about the Ratalang Basham Beach minutes, why a development application was submitted by administration before the committee meeting was even held about that. And also, no, that's the only question I've got about those minutes. Thank you.
So we'll take that one on notice.
And the Heritage Advisory Committee minutes, the Express Court Hindmarsh Island renaming request, I just wondered where that was at, given the Heritage Advisory Committee's recommendation about renaming, but they can only make recommendations, they don't decide that. And when we get to the, before the Customs House item is considered, can we please bring forward the Heritage Advisory Committee recommendation, if that's at all possible?
Thank you. I'll ask the Group Manager, Regional Development, to answer the question about the Heritage Advisory Committee Express Court naming.
Thank you. Through the Chair. The relevant council resolution in relation to that was subject to it being endorsed by the Heritage Advisory Committee. So we're now going back to the applicant for the Land Division and asking them to select a different name from the pre-approved road naming list because Express Court wasn't endorsed by the committee.
Any further? Councillor Maidment.
My questions relate to the Wooden Boat Festival minutes, 28th of January, minute 3.5, with 3 resignations so close to the festival, and I know this might put a bit of extra pressure on the members, and I only hope that do we get to see the reasons why? Was there an exit interview with those people?
Yeah, well, there's two of them, David and the people that run the Murray Delta Duke Joint, and they withdrew because they were in there originally because they felt there would be a lot more music involved in the event, and because it's minimal amount of music entertainment, they decided they're better off putting their efforts into doing stuff at their business. And the other person, Stephen, he stood down, but he's become an ambassador for the festival. So there was no problems at all.
And the second question relating to those same minutes, at minute 4.2, I note that the event manager's report was verbal, and since I believe the event manager has a remuneration of around $35,000, or that's his budget, it's apportioned to event management. I think a written report would be more appropriate so that all elected members could see the transparent use of ratepayers' money. And also, elected members are yet to see a profit and loss budget with staff time costs incurred. We did ask for one quite some time ago, but I haven't seen one.
Through the Chair, sorry, my apologies, my staff haven't provided that to me, but I haven't passed it on yet, so I'll get onto that.
Anything else? If not, I'll put the recommendations to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 3 is adjourned debate. There was none. Item 4 is deputations and presentations. 4.1 is a deputation from Craig Rowe regarding the draft South Coast Growth Strategy and the Goolwa North Code Amendment. So welcome, Craig. Did you need more than 5 minutes?
I need a lot more than 5 minutes. I know if I could get an extra 5, I'd be very appreciative.
Yeah. Are you happy to give an extra time? Yes? Yes. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, members, and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you this afternoon. Firstly, I wish to remind you that I am a planning consultant. I support development for a living. And I have a number of clients in the Fleurieu Peninsula that may or may not benefit as a result of the South Coast Strategy. So I just wish to make my position clear to everybody. Members, it's been 21 or so months since I last came and spoke to you in this chamber about what was then the North Goolwa Code Amendment, and a lot has happened since then. There's been a lot of words and actions undertaken, and some that I agree with and some that I don't. And some I think are relatively dubious, but I want to focus this afternoon on 4 key pieces of land that I think are worthy of further consideration and clarification for the members. The first one you would be aware of is item or area M. And this is the land that's immediately adjacent the western boundary of the township of Goolwa. It's 44 hectares of land. It's deferred urban. I believe that this is the number one option in respect to future development in and about Goolwa. It's a logical extension to the township. It's readily connected to all of the services, and you see up on the aerial photograph, the yellow broken line is the electrical power lines. The blue, bright blue lines are the water mains, and the red is the CWMS. So this land it can be readily connected to all services without major imposition to council and or the community. There is also readily accessible by road, obviously with Kessel Road, Skews Road, Port Elliot Road. There's ample opportunity to get to and from this piece of land. Potentially somewhere between 400 and 700 dwellings, depending on what rate of development. 10 per hectare is about the 400. It can go as high as 16 per hectare. That's probably not going to happen, but it is something that I think warrants further consideration by council. It complements the pattern of development to the east, residential and sea change, and the need, I think the council staff were promoting this as a future employment zone. The GARP that was released some time ago pushes the employment area, well, zones, the future zones, out towards the airport. So this particular piece of land becomes available. It's also outside the EFBA, so there's nothing really that you can object in regards to this particular proposal. It's fairly straightforward, and I would ask council to give this some positive consideration. Next one is our favourite area, Area Q. I'm not going to go through all the background. The council's aware of this. This has been lumped together and it's under the heading of the Traeger land, and it shouldn't have been at all through this process. And I'll explain that in a minute, but this particular piece of land can present or realise between 400 and 500 additional dwellings at 1,200 square metres per allotment. So it's going to be more of a semi-rural living type arrangement. It's not productive land. It's relatively close to shops and services. It's probably half the distance from this land to the shopping centre than it is from the Goolwa Lakeside residential park to the shops. One important thing that's been tossed around a little bit these days, you may have heard, there's a lot of talk about some of this land being sold by the Traegers to Scott Salisbury Homes. I can confirm to you today, members, that we have had negotiations with Scott Salisbury Homes, and they are indeed interested in purchasing this land. So are a number of other organisations. Scott Salisbury Homes are highly credentialed, have a fantastic reputation, and their proposal for this land would be an upmarket coastal estate, something that is unique to the Fleurieu Peninsula, and what we believe would be the jewel in the crown for Goolwa, especially at the gateway to the township. This land is close to residential land. It does have some hiccups. It's in the EFPA. The Minister has the ability to change that if he so desires. And there were some concerns raised by the community in respect to the environment, traffic, wetland and flooding. In respect to the environment, if members remember back 10 years ago when I started with this particular property, we told the council that over 10 hectares of it would be set aside for conservation zone. That's not changed. It's fully intended that the tea trees and that are there were always going to be protected, and in fact, to double down on that, we have a proposal or an acceptance that we would enter into a heritage agreement with the Native Vegetation Council, which would protect that land those trees, etc., for 99 years, and that would be registered on the title. So any fears that the community have about damage to the environment should be appeased. If they had done a little bit of homework, they would have known that that's what was being proposed. The traffic, the access to the site's been accepted by Deputy, but there would be a traffic impact assessment by somebody at some stage at the application stage. And then the wetland and flooding, they're the two same things. Everybody says there's a wetland there. There is sort of a small wetland, but it's actually a stormwater detention area. The water that goes into that wetland generally comes from the northern side of Port Elliot Road through two culverts and floods a big section of Area Q. That, if we're going to call it a wetland, will be part of that 10 hectares, and there's probably going to be another 8 hectares of land that's owned to the west would have to come under that conservation zone as well. So there's going to be a significant commitment to that. What I'd like to do is suggest to Council as an option that they break Area Q into two parts. The western part, which is owned by Mr and Mrs Traeger and Tanya Traeger, and a small portion is owned by Ben Romanowski. We would ask that Council consider to keep that as phase 1. It's 32 hectares. We all know the background. Council supported this since 2015. The outcome of this would be the rehabilitation of a sand mine and the closure of a transport depot. It would allow this high standard, low density residential development. The land that we're talking about is the high land in Area Q, so it's not subject to inundation. From our point of view, we've had a look at this. It's less intrusive in terms of visual impact. You can't see it from Newell Avenue, or hardly you can see it from Newell Avenue, as opposed to the remainder of the land. Close to, as I said, close to township and everything. And what we simply ask the council to do is maintain its support for this property, which you've done for the last 10 or so years, and let's get it off to the Minister and see what the Minister believes. If the Minister doesn't like it, he will let us know and we will miss out. But we just ask you for the opportunity to present that to the Minister as part of phase 1. Phase 2 is the rest of the land. We're not sure of the owners' ideas in respect to future development. Oakford Homes own the largest portion of that. They've been fairly silent to date, but they've got a lot of other land about the area that they've focused on. Mr and Mrs Smith own the pointy bit to the west. They've got some options to do some things there, but it wouldn't be in the foreseeable future. And the piece of land right at the bottom, I forget the owner's name, he has told me that he would like to ultimately get some allotments at the western end, not necessarily right along, because he doesn't want to be surrounded by houses himself. So the impact of that, we don't believe is going to be as severe as what people think, and we ask that Council retain this in phase 2, because this was also impacted by a rezoning 10 years ago, like the Traeger land was. But we think if it goes into phase 2, it will afford Council the opportunity to review this in 5 or 10 or 15 years. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, so it gives you the opportunity to review it. If you want to bring it forward, you can. If the circumstances of the day dictate something else, well, then you can change that. Area G, I'm sort of trying to race through this. Area G is at Mentone Road at Clayton. The Council supported the rezoning of this land back in 2014. It's in a rural living zone, and there's 7 hectare allotments, minimum size. It's one of these weird things in the code. It's, from our point of view, basically overlooked to a great degree, and it's something that we think.
It's 10 minutes, Craig.
All right, I better speed up. We think this is an opportunity that shouldn't be missed, because there's really nothing else we can do with this land, there's water available, there's power available, and there's even a sewer line running down the road and beyond. The more important thing, I'm going to zip through this, is North Goolwa. And this, what I've got on the screen now, is an option that I'd like the council to consider. I've talked to this option with a number of people, including council staff. The area in green, I would like to suggest to members should be a no development zone, a buffer. There's 138 hectares of land there. The rest of the land I've got numbers on, and that's staging. Stage 1 is included in my proposal, and then we go from there. That's got an idea of what sort of houses come out of it, and 138 hectares would be protected, and that would protect what the community fought against. They fought against.
We've sort of gone over the time, and we're eating into the limited amount of question
sorry,
time.
this is important, this one, so I'll forego questions if I need. This preserves the character of the town. It's a compromise, and it hasn't been put to the community, but the community wanted the character of the town to be protected and the town gateway to be protected. This achieves that to a certain degree. It might not appease the community, but it does get over a few hurdles. And the yellow lines there are the Code Amendment, the North Goolwa Code Amendment. So they're not really affected by this proposal. I think it's a great compromise that should be considered. And basically, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. I think there's solid reasons for the inclusion of the properties, and I'm more than happy to meet with council again at some stage and elaborate on some of the stuff that I've put here. I think they're all worthy of due consideration. I thank you for your time.
So are there any, we have got limited time, any questions? Councillor Corella?
I'll be quick on this one. I guess the community is probably very much interested in Area Q, and I guess it's probably very good news that someone like Scott Salisbury Homes, a fairly reputable builder, is very interested. So is their interest only to do with what's basically the Traeger land? Is that the only portion that they're interested in?
Yes. Oakford own the majority of the rest of it, and the Smiths and one other. So yeah, they're only interested in the Traeger land.
And sorry, when you mentioned the number of land parcels, depending on the size, if we're looking at 1,200 1,200 square metre allotments, would that be between 400 and 500 on that particular, or is it something less?
It's 400 and 500 for the whole of Kew, but with the Traeger land, there's only about 100. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, and thanks, Craig, for the information. So I noted that you've said councils have supported, so in relation to Area Q, you stated that council have supported development there since 2015, but in 2024, only 14.5% of respondents in our community consultation supported development of that area. So I just wonder, you know, council must act in reflection of the priorities and values of our community. So how could council consider going forward when it just doesn't, we haven't got a demonstrated support from our community?
Yeah, you haven't got enough time for me to answer that, but I'll quickly answer it. Firstly, the Middleton, I've got to get this right, Foreshore and Township Association, or Residents Association, were very active in the information that they presented to the community. That information, or some of that information, was inaccurate, absolutely inaccurate, and I can identify all the documents and show you that, and I'm prepared to do so, maybe not necessarily in a public forum. The survey that council undertook was compromised, and it was compromised in a number of ways. There was an error in the document relating to land on High Marsh Island, which was changed halfway through the consultation without notice, and the council planning staff had 3 information sessions and members attended those. We are aware that council staff openly, and I'll say it in public, openly advised members of the public that they did not support Area Q. So if that's not compromising a survey, because we don't know how many people they said that to, we don't know how many people actually listened, we don't know how many people put submissions in. So what we have is we have an association that's peddling inaccurate information, and we have a council staff telling the community that they don't support it. So the natural conclusion for some people is to oppose it. And the people of Goolwa, The 3,667 people that oppose North Goolwa have no reason to oppose Area Q. The Middleton people are looking after their own patch, and I do not blame them.
So
everybody does that.
We're out of time, Craig. Sorry.
Done.
So
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Craig. Thank you
very much.
Thanks for your time. So 4.2 is a deputation from Ms Christine Munro, Robert Clayton and Kathy Bartell regarding a fire break on the northern side of Walter Newell Reserve, Ditmar Court, Goolwa Beach. Would you like to come forward? Who's doing the main speaking? Christine? Yeah, you should all come up then if you want to ask any answer any questions later. You need more than 5 minutes?
I hope not.
Okay, we'll see how we go.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Parks and councillors. My name is Christine Munro. I would like to introduce you to Kath Bartell and Robert Clayton. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to voice our concerns. We are speaking on behalf of the residents of Ditmar Court, Goolwa Beach, and to support our petition regarding the very real fire danger within the Walter Newell Reserve and the need for a 5-metre fire break to be constructed along the entire northern boundary which abuts Ditmar Court and Thornbury Park Residential Aged Care Village. The residents of Ditmar Court are all in their senior years. The 5 homes that are directly adjoining the reserve have an average age of 80, some of which are mobility challenged. Trees and thick vegetation are very close to the back fences and distances vary 1, 2, 3 metres, not the required uniform 5-metre clearance allowing fire truck access. The resident Joan, who lives at number 16, has a tree which is in line with the top of her fence. Joan is 91. Trees for Life clean up the southern boundary of the reserve but do not maintain the northern side. As the photos I submitted with the petition show, it is very overgrown and the trees are being strangled by what we believe to be bridal vine, as parts of the trees are dying. Some of the residents are concerned about the she oaks and their oil content. If they were to catch fire, they would burn for some time. The trees are in close proximity to their homes along Ferguson Road and in the reserve. Under the trees, the bushes die off, but they are not being cleaned up, therefore adding to the fuel load and consequent fire risk. Branches and limbs fall from the trees. We understand some need to be left as habitat, but those that fall close to our homes need to be removed regularly. We have had rubbish left in the reserve and makeshift shelters. These have been removed and disposed of by my neighbours who live at number 18. Rachel from the council commented about removing a bike with seized brakes from the reserve. I have found cigarette butts discarded along the northern fence line and have disposed of them hoping to discourage the practice. A gateway from Ferguson Road close to Ditmar Court homes has open access to the reserve and I have heard motorbikes being ridden and I have personally observed the tyre tracks. This access needs to be restricted. There have been several fires in the past. The one in January 2004 threatened my home and was deliberately lit. Fire trucks had easy access as my home was the only one built along that northern boundary. Now we have no fire truck access. We love the habitat and the environment. We just want it cleaned up on a regular basis, reducing the threat to human life and property. We need to feel safe when the temperatures are extremely high, but we don't. We need a uniform fire break along the entire length of the northern boundary of the reserve and access for fire trucks. Plant life will and can regenerate, human life does not. Thank you for listening and hopefully taking our concerns seriously.
Thank you, Christine. Any questions? Councillor Maidman.
Yes, thanks for your petition. Sort of 3 or 4 years ago, I was speaking with Julie Burgess, who's a friend of mine. She was running Thornbury Park, and I actually went to have a look at Walter Newell Reserve. So you are aware that of the 5-metre fuel management zone. It's stated in the Walter Newell Reserve Management Plan. Do you have a copy of that?
It's an old copy.
Yeah, 2015 it was...
yeah, I have got that.
Yeah. And at that time, council did remove some vegetation, but they didn't, obviously, did they make the 5 metre break? They didn't. Okay, so that's 3 or 4 years ago.
I would love it some people have been out to observe it firsthand. It would be great if a lot of other people could come out and see what we're talking about, because it's very, very bad, actually.
Further questions, Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Christine. I came out and have had a walk through and I've had a look. I know that you talk to a lot of residents on your street, and of course you would have through the petition. Can you share some of the impact or the level of stress that this causes for some of those residents in their sort of day-to-day life? Well,
because they're elderly, they fear some of the trees will, if they caught fire, they would keep on burning. And some of them are mobility challenged. They're in wheelchairs, or they just can't. They feel that they can't get away in time if they had to go. There was some letters that people put in response to my petition. Unfortunately, I haven't got them here in front of me. Yeah. Well, the 91-year-old wouldn't get out anyway. She'd be very challenged.
She's very frail.
So there's a lot of different things that came out of all this. Mostly they're about the she oaks, I guess, and the potential for them to burn and the close proximity to their houses and stuff like that. But our main concern is that a fire truck would not get back there at all. Even if they put a hose from Ferguson Road through, they've got to dodge the trees all the way through because there's too many trees to get through. Yeah, I think that's our main concern, is that we would just love to know that we're protected in terms of a fire.
Any other questions? Christine, I'm very, very familiar with this and your problem. The CFS won't go in there, it's too dangerous. It's a death trap. If the CFS get into Thornbury Park itself to try and save houses along that back fence, they can't get out.
No.
It is a shocking thing. We've asked many times to have this thing fixed up, and I know people in the CFS who repeatedly bring it up with me. They're amazed that there hasn't been a serious fire go through it, and really understand your concern and your nervousness as elderly people, particularly.
Well, yeah, we all
living on the back of it. Yeah, I mean,
we're
it
all
is
not
a big
young.
problem. Yeah, so
But the thing is,
you share your thoughts.
Yeah,
so.
The thing is too, I think that if a fire did take hold in there, it wouldn't be just our homes, the whole street would go, and it would go further.
Yeah. You need to go, those
Thornbury
members
Park,
that haven't,
yeah.
if you haven't been to Thornbury Park, you need to go in there and have a drive through, and imagine trying to get a fire truck in and out of it. It's pretty impossible. So thanks very much, Christine.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob, thank you. So 4.3 is Mr. Royden Rogers wishes to talk to us about risks to health and well-being of Alexandrina Council residents. So welcome, Royden.
Thanks, Mayor, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry, I would say you've already asked me for 10 minutes.
Sorry, yes.
So the Chamber happy with
yes, thank
extra
you.
time? Yep. Is anybody not happy? Probably be easier. They might get a hand up then. Okay? No, that's okay. Thank you.
My name is Royden Rogers. We've met before. It's a pleasure to be back, and thank you for the opportunity. You'll recall that I, along with Dr. Vicky McLaughlin, addressed you at the December 16 Council meeting regarding research revealing hazardous levels of DNA contamination in COVID-19 injections administered to millions of Australians. I'm not going to rehash that message this evening, but I will address the core issues from the point of view of the health and well-being of the Alexandrina community. When correspondence first arrived from Port Hedland to council members in November last year, some responses I received from elected members were along the lines that health issues are state and federal government concerns and beyond the remit of local council. Some time has passed since then, and I do hope the elected members have had time to reflect on the December presentation, to do further personal research and to consider that this issue is indeed something that this council can take positive action on. Meanwhile, I have researched the scope of the health landscape in this state. I've learned that Section 51 and 52 of the South Australian Health Act 2011 requires each local council in South Australia to, and I quote, prepare, maintain and report on a regional public health plan that is consistent with the state public health plan and responds to the public health challenges within their local area or region, end quote. Subsequently, I found such a plan for our region called the Southern Hills LGA Regional Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, which is on screen. Is there a way to scroll down to the bottom, Tanya? Yes, thank you. Please note at the bottom of this front page that the Alexandrina Council is one of 6 member councils or signatories to this plan. I doubt that many in the gallery or in our community would have been aware of this plan. The plan is very extensive and broad and is essentially a template for ensuring that residents of our community have the best opportunity for a good quality of life, that is, a state of health and wellness. And that's obviously an admirable thing. I now want to refer back to the COVID-19 injections, which we are told were administered to the majority of Australians. Let's say ballpark figure of 85%. In Alexandrina, that would equate to over 25,000 of us, our family members, our neighbours and friends, who are potentially suffering from or at risk of some of the negative health issues that have been correlated with the delivery of the COVID-19 injections. Like many of you, my wife and I have sons and daughters and grandchildren, and some of us have taken the COVID-19 injections. My wife and myself consider that we are older and have lived much of our lives, but we do live with nagging fears of the unknown consequences of these injections for our families. How can we not? These are fears that keep us awake at night. Are these detrimental effects being shouted from the rooftops or reported on the evening news or in the newspapers or the Southern Argus? Unfortunately not, but many in the gallery know that they are real. I know that they are real. Dr. Vicky McLaughlin reported right here that they are real. Many medical professionals globally are reporting that they are real, and some of you elected members have experienced that they are real. What I implore you to consider right now is this. How can we possibly be signatories to a regional health and wellbeing plan aimed at ensuring a high quality of life for our residents if we do not acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is those in our community who are suffering bereavement from family members who have died, or those who are suffering ill health following mRNA injections, or indeed the hidden suffering of those who were coerced into taking the injections and now live in fear of the future ill health, infertility, or genetic abnormalities carrying over into their descendants. To feel content with ourselves for having a glossy health and wellbeing plan, but ignore this elephant in the room, quite frankly, would be outrageous. It would be irresponsible, negligent, and incredibly disrespectful to our community. Council can and must demonstrate a moral duty of care to this community by taking action, and I want to thank Councillor Scott for bringing an appropriate motion to this meeting tonight, calling for such action. For those who may still have lingering doubts about whether it's okay for Council to take action, let us have a look at page 16 of the Regional Health and Wellbeing Plan. Please note down at the highlighted bit where it says Advocacy. Look at the words carefully. Advocacy, these are the various roles that are appropriate to local council. Advocacy to relevant bodies, in brackets, e.g., making representations on behalf of the community to other tiers of government. I repeat, making representations on behalf of the community to other tiers of government. Ladies and gentlemen, That is precisely the focus of Councillor Scott's motion this evening, and I implore you to support it. And what is the aim of that motion? What is the aim of any similar motion? By holding a thorough investigation into the safety of the COVID-19 injections, it will be possible to clearly identify and quantify any adverse health issues. We know that heart conditions such as myocarditis, pericarditis, blood clots, brain aneurysms, advanced Alzheimer's, turbo cancers, infertility, autoimmune dysfunction, acceleration of existing illnesses are some of the suspected smoking guns from the shots. If the ill effects and causes can be clearly identified and understood, and necessary resources allocated, and this wouldn't be our role, obviously, this is the role of governments, then we could be very hopeful that our scientists and health practitioners could find health solutions to help those sufferers. Nailing down the facts means that we can nail down the answers. To turn a blind eye and do nothing is absolutely not an option. Such a thorough investigation as I have suggested will also help to ensure that some of the mistakes made by our government and institutions are not repeated ever again in future. A couple of final thoughts. We live in a society described as a democracy. In a democracy, no institution should be beyond scrutiny. Not our state or federal governments, not the TGA, not health departments, not even this council. In a democracy, we are entitled to and should be expected to ask questions, to demand checks and balances and accountability of those in positions of responsibility. I want to point out a couple of positives to you. In a council such as ours, facing financial and budgetary challenges, taking action on this issue should be a no-brainer. There is no financial costs, requires negligible time allocation, has the potential to benefit almost every resident, and affords this council a heroic status in demonstrating care and compassion for its people. This council, by supporting Councillor Scott's motion and joining those of other councillors, can have a voice for 30,000 of our residents and thousands of other Australians by calling for answers to some very important questions affecting our state of health and wellbeing and obviously our enjoyment of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Rawdon. Is there any questions? Anybody got any questions? No? Councillor Scott.
Yes, I just wondered, can you give us any idea of the number of councils across Australia? I know it's a bit of a challenge, but across Australia that are supporting it or have intimated that they will be supporting it, please?
Sure.
Or even in South Australia? Thank you.
Yes, certainly. I am engaged with the network across Australia that's interested in this subject. There are a lot of active councils across Australia. My knowledge of South Australia is a bit more intimate, and I can confirm that approximately 25% of South Australian council communities are in varying stages of engaging their council on this pursuit, and that includes some that already have moved motions. Ceduna has moved a positive motion through council for action. Streaky Bay has moved a positive motion for action, and Grant in the southeast have moved a positive action for motion. Narra Court has a motion going to council next week. So that just gives you a rough idea. But there is activity all over Australia. There's a big push it's taken a while for people to capture the concept of this, and also obviously Christmas was an interruption to the flow of actions as well.
Any further questions? So thanks very much, Rawdon. Thanks for your time again. Thanks. So 4.4 is a deputation from Mr. Sandy Ricks regarding the future growth principles for Goolwa and Middleton. You wish to speak to us? Thanks, Sandy. Do you need more than 5 minutes?
Probably just a little bit more. Hopefully, not much more.
Everybody okay with that? Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, members, for the opportunity. I'm really here to ask for maybe just a little bit of a different approach to growth in our area, and that's really looking much more closely at livability and walkability rather than just dwellings, especially dwellings on large blocks. So I'm really asking you to think about livability and walkability when you look at your growth strategy, which I think is in a draft form, not yet resolved. So, fully resolved. So this sort of livability approach is evidence-based, and there's lots of data from many research people around Australia and across the world about how to match infrastructure really with growth. And that's the big challenge, I think, for Alexandrina, like it is for nearly everyone else. So it's a joined up response. It recognises community thinking. We've heard about that a little bit in terms of some areas, and it generates more confidence in council, and it increases the chances of external funding for projects, development projects. Victoria's done a lot of work on a sort of neighbourhood approach, which is walking, having shops and services within a walkable area, and also designing areas with sustainability and climate extremes in mind. So I'm not going to go through all those things, but you can see diversity of housing is one of them, more places to meet, loneliness and sort of isolation is a big problem in towns and cities, and also the local businesses tend to benefit too from a focus on livability and walkability. So I'm suggesting perhaps that there are two strategies, and I think in many cases council is thinking about these already. I've had limited contact with some of the planning people at the council just to see what's going on, but really I'm suggesting that the multiple locations approach be reinforced, and that's sensitive infill, contiguous with existing townships. So you wouldn't be going for area Q as a sort of an outlier. You'd be trying to contain the growth within townships and within new areas that are master planned. So those areas would be around the edges of the towns. In terms of area Q, 2.6 kilometres is not a walkable area in anybody's mind. It's hardly cyclable. Whereas if you do get some development at Goolwa North, hopefully it'll be master planned, it'll be co-designed by the community, and hopefully before the developers come in to do the houses and the social and hard infrastructure in terms of schools and shops and so forth, you can get these networks of walking paths, cycling paths and other infrastructure in before they're developed. Walkable services are very important in terms of healthy communities. That's mental health and physical health. So strategy 2, I'm suggesting that more agitation perhaps from council members and staff goes into absolute zoning protection of intervillage areas. And I consider area Q to be an intervillage area in the foreseeable planning future. So to keep the visual, cultural, historic and community identity of Middleton and Goolwa in particular, I'm obviously, well, I'm a resident of Goolwa Beach. I'm a town planner with 40 or 50 years experience, unfortunately. I'm also very passionate about keeping the identity of these townships like Middleton and Goolwa. The parents have lived here for 30 years. We live part-time in their house on Kitely Road, and I'm very passionate about protecting the coastal environment, the waterways and the vegetation, and also maintaining a healthy economic base for jobs and tourism. And if development isn't done well and occurs in a strip fashion on big blocks and so forth, then the area is not going to be attractive for visitors and tourism will tend to stagnate. So the actions I'm suggesting are that you prioritise contiguous areas around the existing towns, and I think that's been borne out not only by your growth strategy, but by today's release of the final GARP, the final Greater Adelaide Regional Plan. Area Q is not listed in that plan, in that government plan, and I think it would be a mistake to pursue development there, particularly to the east, nearest to Goolwa. I think it's land commonly known as the Traeger land. The second action I'd be suggesting or requesting that you consider further is fight for rezoning of the key parts of the EFPAs. Now, today the Premier has announced and the Minister Champion has announced that the EFPAs will be up for review. I think there are a number of areas of EFPAs that probably should be reviewed and could become either new urban infill areas or become conservation areas for absolute protection. And I'm keen, for obvious reasons as a Goolwa beach resident, but also because I love this area, my brother lives over in Victor Harbour, that these townships are kept in an identifiable format rather than just strip growth along the coast. So that's about rezoning and protection of the villages. And the third one is really about I don't think we can avoid Goolwa North as a probable future growth area, and I think we just have to fight. When I'm talking about we, I'm asking you and us as residents to fight for proper master planning, and that means getting all the services and buffers and healthy walking and cycling routes in place beforehand, before development occurs, and getting a diversity of housing, not just big houses on big blocks. We do not really need more upmarket estates. What we need is a combination of affordable housing, of social housing, and of housing for wealthier people. So we need to be thinking about different ways of doing subdivisions with minimal paved areas. Some of the areas that are most loved in Goolwa don't have curbs, you know, all those sorts of things, minimal road widths. We need to think about that rather than this plonking in a sense of suburban development from the city on the edges of our towns. So I think that's the essence of what I'm saying. I'm quite passionate about wanting that to happen, and I think the growth strategy is a good guide. You only need to tweak it a bit, and I think that we could go forward with some confidence. But I would emphasise that livability and walkability should be the catch cries of future development, not car-driven development that's a long way from anywhere. The chance at Goolwa, I think, is to provide local shops, local services, a primary school, all those sorts of things, job areas for jobs, more or less in one place, so people don't have to drive a long way. Hopefully we'll get some public transport down here eventually, and there'll probably be a bypass behind the towns, but I'd just like to request that you consider even more carefully a focus on livability for future growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandy. Are there any questions of Sandy? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandy, thank you very much. I'm curious if you know any examples where co-design between council or community and a private developer has happened and worked successfully.
Yeah, sure. I was fortunate enough to be the Director of Master Planning for the Bowden development in inner city Adelaide, and also for Playford North, right out on the edge of, well, it was then, I guess, the northern edge of the city. Both of those approaches involve co-design in the sense that right from the beginning we asked the community, we did not only ask the community what they wanted, but we had quite extensive workshops. For Bowden we had a 3-day charrette where the community was involved in determining a huge number of issues, right from road, like a grid pattern or another pattern, allotment sizes, sustainability improvements, and where the shops might be, and how the area around it might be protected, even though it might have been, some was farmland in Playford North, some was existing suburbs. and what sort of diversity of housing they would like. Some of them had difficulty with higher density housing, but they admitted that there were people that really couldn't afford to live in anything else, really. So those sort of 3-day events where people are involved and you have a whole lot of experts as well as the community combining, getting to know each other and talking through the issues is a great example, I think, of co-design.
Any further questions? Councillor Coomans?
I was just going back towards the end of your presentation when you mentioned things like no curbing, no footpaths, narrow roads, small blocks. So is that what you're advocating? Are you looking at that Goolwa and such becomes a Mount Barker or a Seacliff?
Well,
what are you actually saying about that?
Mount Barker is a pretty bad example. I'm advocating diversity, so you would have some large lots, but you would also have areas designed for smaller lots and row houses perhaps that are more affordable. They might only be 1 and 2 bedrooms, those sorts of things. And the market, I think, in the future down here will demand that in a sense, and we don't want just the same cookie cutter type of development. In terms of the public realm and roads and streets, a lot of stormwater can be collected and dispersed in swales without having to have a huge stormwater network and totally paved roads and curbs. That means it runs into the river. So detention basins, all those sorts of things are very good things to have.
Any further questions? No, sir. Sandy, thank you very much for your time and your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
So item 5 is petitions. 5.1 is a petition relating to the fire break on the northern side of Walter Newell Reserve, Ditmar Court, Goolwa Beach. And there's a recommendation that we receive the petition and note that the Infrastructure Division have met with their petitioner to try and resolve the issues within the thing. It's moved, Councillor Maidment. Seconded, Councillor Gardner. So, recommendation 2, all those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Item 6 is questions with notice. 6.1 is a question from Councillor Mellor regarding asset improvement plan monitoring and reporting and management of gifted assets. And the question and the answer to that is in the agenda. Item 7 is questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I have 2 questions. The first one is, will Council be making a submission to the Legislative Council Select Committee on short-term accommodation?
Council will make a decision on that at some stage. So we are members of the Australian Coastal Councils Association, the University of Nicole Guerin, Professor at the New South Wales University of New South Wales, has been working for 2 years on a submission to the federal government on the effects of short-term holiday rental. We should see that report at the end of April at a meeting today, and that report will come to us, and as a member council we will then have the opportunity, if we wish to progress it to our contacts.
And so my other question was, when will we as a chamber have an opportunity to discuss the ASCOSA advice to council?
Through the chair, so the plan is to have the ASCOSA report go to the Council's Audit and Risk Committee meeting in March, and then into Council at the April meeting.
Any further questions without notice? We'll move on to item 8, which is notice of motions. 8.1 is a motion from Councillor Scott regarding COVID-19 vaccine contamination. It's moved by Councillor Scott. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. if I may. I'd like to preface my remarks by acknowledging the amazing work that was done by the medical profession and the allied health workers during the whole of COVID. It was an enormous task, including the police department, and they went way above and beyond. I've been happy to bring this to the chamber for two reasons. One, for confirmation and clarity of what was done during that time, which was the first major pandemic that we've had in 100 years, and many of us would not remember the last one. And secondly, to provide a greater awareness and preparedness for the future. I think that it's fairly obvious, and the experts tell us that it's not if but when another pandemic will hit us, and it probably sooner rather than later, and it would be in our best interest to be better prepared, or at least well prepared anyhow. This isn't a sort of a hyped up version of those in favour of vaccination against those that aren't in favour of vaccinations at all. That's another issue altogether. It's all about how did it all go? Was it really successful, and what were the problems that were encountered along the way and the consequential problems? If there's a major fire or some calamity, there is an investigation into it at length, whatever it might be. Some even a royal commission if things go wrong, to get to the bottom of what happened. I see this as no different. It was a very, very serious affliction on the peoples of the world, and I think that we as individuals and leading medical people should be diligent and pursue some sort of resolve and investigation into what happened. I think it was a world record on the development of a vaccine in time. It was extraordinarily fast. But if we go back, and to be absolutely fair, everybody was hanging out wanting the vaccine to be made available. They just couldn't wait. We didn't know. No one knew where the pandemic was going, where the virus was going, and what effects it would have, where it would end. And there was an amazing amount of work done to get that vaccine out. There were several false starts, I believe. But in the end, there was one or two vaccines that were distributed to the world. Now, it's when we were first alerted to this, and I, like every other councillor in Australia, received a notification from Port Hedland Council. I thought it's above our heads. Health generally is looked after federally and state, and I wondered what really we could do. But on reflection, I think that it needs every council to raise this to the federal government, to give support and I guess some weight behind what is the need to go and investigate. I have been increasingly concerned at what I have heard from friends and colleagues in the medical profession about... Isn't this working? Oh, sorry. Well, I pressed it. It obviously didn't work. We've had a variety of things. People tell me the lists of some of these problems are just going up extraordinarily high post the vaccination, and there are some elements of it, extensions of that I'd rather not talk about now. But I think it's all very, very worthy of someone investigating it. And in the same vein that Scott Morrison said straight afterwards, we need to get to the bottom of this, we need to go to China and find out. And that landed, of course, very badly and blew up in his face. But I believe, without getting political, that he wanted to get to the bottom of how this thing started so we could stop it ever happening again. And I think we shouldn't shy away from being prepared to delve into the background and the ins and outs of the development of this vaccine. I don't think it's about apportioning blame. It's about getting to the bottom, to making sure that if this ever happens again, that the steps are taken that will perhaps prevent some of these unexpected consequences from occurring. So I seek the support of the Chamber to put this through. It has no risk to Council. It's purely, it's got to go through some layers, but it's purely local government petitioning the federal government to at least just have an inquiry and look into it, and then quite openly share the results with the Australian community. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for it, Councillor Maidment? Any discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe in the importance of vaccination, and in fact as a university student I participated in a clinical vaccine trial for the Ross River virus, but I also believe in the importance of being able to ask questions. I was on the Health Advisory Council in 2023 and went to a conference where we heard directly from staff in the South Australian Communicable Diseases Control Branch who sort of gave us a reflection on South Australia's response. And I, as Councillor Scott mentioned, have such a deep appreciation for those individuals who did such hard yards through that time and tried to make the best decisions that they could on the go. The Commonwealth COVID-19 Response Inquiry Report was released last year, and Chapter 5 talks all about trust. So trust in government is an essential foundation in accepting recommendations and following advice. That's especially so in health. Information and transparency is incredibly important. This motion is simply asking for information, and I have no reason not to support it, particularly where members of our own community have worked so hard to bring this to our attention. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Scott, do you want to use your right of reply? Can we stay with me at the meeting? I asked anyway. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Parkes. I've sort of thought long and hard about this, and I've listened to the presentations that we had last December and other correspondence that have been sent to me. And to me, a lot of this is sort of well above me. I don't claim to be any sort of medical person. But the people I do listen to are people like Professor Nicola Spiro, the Chief Health Officer of South Australia. And during the pandemic, she was the one that was advising us what to do and when to do it, and the vast majority of Adelaideans were doing exactly that, or South Australians. I've had 4 doses. My pharmacist says I'm due for the 5th, and we'll probably work a time that he'll do that. Some of the stats say that both vaccines are about 95% efficient in prevention of COVID. Moderna seems to have some adverse effects, but they seldom cause any long-term effects. This is the readings that I've been able to do. And so, look, I commend the people who are sort of pushing for this. I guess I'm not convinced that this is the path we should be taking. I mean, the council doesn't actually provide COVID vaccines. It does for some other things, but not for this. So in terms of any risk to council, there isn't any, because we're not involved in the COVID-19 vaccines. So sort of on balance, look, I can't support this. and I think I won't be voting for it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Scott, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Thank you. It was known even at the start that one of the vaccines could cause death. People knew that. Very low numbers. I think it was 1 or 2 per million. But I did say, what happens if you're the 1 or 2 in the million? And people say, oh, well, it's so insignificant it doesn't matter. It didn't matter except for the people that were the 1 or 2 in the million. But since then, we've had things like sudden death through pericarditis and that sort of thing, and an increase in some of the some other conditions. And I honestly can see no reason why we should not ask. We're not causing a ruckus, we're just asking, hopefully, along with all the other councils in Australia, for the federal government to declare or to hold an inquiry and be transparent with the results, because I think we will find that there are some shortcomings with the whole thing which need to be aired. And the second part of my reason for raising this is to be better prepared for the future. And that's what I hope we can do. And I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
That ends the discussion, so I'll put the motion to you. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. To 8.2, which is a motion from Councillor Miller regarding the development of an information or briefing sessions policy. It's moved. Councillor Miller, do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Worship. I just would like to take out where it says the policy include, I would like to say the policy be limited to. So just to remove include. I just wanted to say the policy be limited to, and then the dot points, the following dot points. And the reason that I'm asking for this, Your Worship, is because when I joined council up until, when I was contemplating council, and often I'd go to the website and I'd find an audio recording of briefing sessions. I'm sure that that was the case. Then in December, after our election, that process or practice ceased, and I found it really helpful to understand sometimes decisions were just made in the chamber without any discussion because they'd been discussed at briefings. So I think this is a really positive step towards transparency and openness. The main motivation that I wanted for this audio to be released is because we are undertaking 8 workshops to build our budget, and I think that's a marvellous initiative. And the discussions that have been going on are really useful and helpful. And I just think, for those who can't get here, being able to hear how we are building this budget and what we are taking into consideration will be really useful if they should want to listen to it. So I do agree. I do think a policy position would be helpful, but the main focus I wanted from this is the 8 audio recordings of the workshops being released. So this doesn't really address that, but that's what I'm trying to achieve. And if there's any way to make that happen, then I would be more than comfortable for that to happen. So I just don't want this, having a policy position, being delayed to releasing recordings of audios. So I do want to also ask that there be a time limit on this, because I don't want to be sitting here in a year's time with no policy and no audio recordings of information briefing sessions being released. So I'm seeking some advice on what this means if I want to get the 8 budget workshop recordings released.
So do we have a seconder, Councillor Maidment?
Can I speak to that? Well, in the absence of live streaming, this is a great alternative. And it's interesting to note that our CEO is in agreement with this policy as proposed. And if you talk about policies, we did turn around with a pontoon policy in a very short space of time. So I don't think that there'd be too much of a problem personally that this could also turn around in a short space of time. But I'll leave that up to administration.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. Is it possible to delete the words "the policy be limited to the following"? Because I think if admin's going to go to all the trouble of writing a policy, there might be other things that you need to consider and bring to our attention, such as the live streaming initiatives and other things.
So can you ask me the question?
I would like to see the sentence "the policy be limited to the following" be deleted or changed back to the way it was before, so the policy to include, but not be limited to just those things. Because we do have another initiative on the table, which is live streaming, which you're coming back very shortly with, and that's going to cut across this. And there may well be other things that you're able to bring to our attention that we need to consider. And it doesn't change the effect of the resolution.
So that would be up to the mover and the seconder to agree to that change? No. Yes or no? No. So that stays like it is. So is there any further discussion? You can have your right of reply, yeah. Yep. Councillor Coomans.
Thank you, Mayor Parkes. Yeah, look, I'm sorry I didn't raise it high enough. Look, I don't have any real issue with this. It seems like putting a policy together is fairly straightforward because it just needs the 7 clauses in Section 90A of the legislation to be the body of the policy, and just needs some topping and tailing to make it Alexandrina. And then maybe it includes some information about some comments about local practices such as recording for those unable to attend, the need to place presentations on the public record, and if there's a need to promote the sessions. Council now provides much information about coming sessions on the Facebook page as it is. It doesn't need elected members to add to that. There's also the issue of the gallery not being able to hear because microphones are not used for that purpose, and that probably needs a bit of sorting out as well. So other than that, I think it's fairly straightforward.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller, do you wish to write a reply?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to clarify why I didn't want to expand on this, because there is already a request for live streaming to be explored. I'm focused on information briefing sessions. That's what I want this to relate to. They are different. Council meetings are conducted differently to how information briefing sessions are conducted. So I am really focusing this just on, at this point in time, information sessions, turning that around really quickly, and I'm hoping that perhaps we could have something in April, because I really do want to have at the very least, the budget sessions released. So that's the only reason why. I just want to focus on information sessions, keep it tight, go back to what was happening prior to the November 22 council elections, because come December, immediately after those elections, this practice stopped, and that's all I'm seeking to restore, but put some policy around it. So I hope that this will be supported. Thank you.
So that ends the discussion. I'll put the motion to you. All those in favour? Against? Against? It's carried. 8.3 is a motion from Councillor Miller regarding the 24-25 annual business plan for performance reporting, 1st of July 24 to the 30th of March 25.
Thank you, Worship. I won't read out what's printed in the agenda because they are my reasons for asking for this. There is a gap in us reporting to our community what we're doing throughout the year. If we had something like this happening every quarter, we would have been able to share with our community the savings and efficiencies that we endorsed at the budget last year in Appendix D of our annual business plan, which are very focused on savings and efficiencies. And I think we would have been able to demonstrate that we are modernising this organisation, we are supporting that. There are processes that are being automated to improve efficiencies, but they come at a cost. And it would have been a really lovely way for us to keep telling our community and sharing the good news stories with our community about what we've been doing as a chamber and supporting the administration to do. So this is a very simple report, and I did have an example that I just realised I forgot to hit send on an email that would have shown how very simple this is. It just, it complements the resolutions of council register, and it'll just tell us, we said, community, that we would do these things this year, and here's how we're going with it. It's very simple to prepare. Once you've gotten the first one done, it's just a matter of updating. So I hope that this will be supported, and I do note that the officers' comments, and I really appreciate the support that's been provided from administration for this, and I think this will help us share with our community just what we're doing, and what we said we'd do, we are actually doing. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Nicholson? Discussion? Councillor Kermans.
Thank you. Look, the thrust of this I don't have an issue with. I just think the motion could be a lot more punchy, because it includes both a bit of emotion, then it directs readers to some pages, then provides a description on where to go. I would have thought the motion needed a bit more punchy. And I had to read it a number of times to work out exactly what it was being asked for, and I came to the conclusion that the motion is really that we're asking for a progress report in conjunction with the May 2025 quarterly budget review for the period that July to March, outlining the progress on operating initiatives and the successes or otherwise of the program delivery. I think that's what's being asked for. All of the other stuff could really have been part of some background information that sort of provides a bit of background as to what this one's all about. So I think I'm supporting it, but jeepers, it could have been written a lot better.
Any further discussion? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. I support the intent of this motion, but I do read the second paragraph of the officer's comments, and I'm interpreting that as being it's not able to be achieved, not without some other compensation like our business plan. So could you please clarify? Could you please clarify the second paragraph of your response, where I'm interpreting that as saying this is unable to be achieved in this time frame?
Through the Mayor, what the comment is referring to is some of the pages that are referenced that it's asking for a report on aren't broken. So there's a listing of all types of services and things council provide. Some of those don't have their own cost centre. So what the officer's comment was saying is we were planning on bringing you a quarterly report for the next quarter anyway on the new operating initiatives. But technically what's been requested on pages, I think it might be the 40 to 43, is kind of a bit of a list that we use to demonstrate to the community how much money we might have been spending on Goolwa Oval, how much money we might have been spending on pools. So it would be really hard for us to report in that exact format, but we're certainly planning on bringing a report back to you anyway.
So I would have thought this is a do your best you can.
Yeah, through the Chair, if I may, I acknowledge that as an organisation we need to do a lot better in terms of the reporting. I myself need to have a better understanding of where we're at in terms of delivery. But as Tash has said, we need to get our ducks in a row in terms of how our annual business plan and budget is organised and how that relates to the various financial aspects of that expenditure. So we've got a lot of work to do to get certainly to where I'd like to be. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? So you'll write a reply?
Thank you, Worship. I'd be happy to remove listed in pages 40 to 43, consistent with the administration's advice. I did actually, I appreciate Councillor Cooman's feedback, and I did provide a table with this for that very reason, to make it very clear, but that wasn't able to be accommodated in agenda production, was the advice to me. So I then had to get wordy and say, at the very least, if we could have operating initiatives in Appendix D, because it's easy to say for those, started in not commenced or completed. So that was why it turned out the way that it did. But I do appreciate the succinctness of it is not probably as good as it could have been. But if it's just Appendix D, we would have, I think it'll give us all a heads up. We don't find this information out until November, well after our year is finished and we've endorsed the new budget. We get this information in the annual report, and that's too late. So I'm hoping that you'll support that. It's just giving us a status update on what's listed in Appendix D of the annual business plan.
So that you're taking those pages out is a variation to your motion. So we would need Councillor Nicholson to support that and the leave of the meeting to change that. Is there anybody opposed to it? It's just easy to ask who's opposed to it. Nobody. So we can take that out. Okay with that? Yep. So that ends the discussion. So we'll put the motion to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 9 is administration reports. 9.1 is consultation and feedback summary on the proposed relocation of visitor services and visual arts. There are 2 recommendations, so we'll do them individually. But first, Stacey, is there anything new or anything you want to clarify about it? So, are there any questions for clarity? And I mean clarity, not the process. Something in there that you don't understand that's mentioned. So, questions for clarity. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Worship. Will this recommendation result in consultation with the community, or just the elected members?
Thank you. Through the chair. Sorry, Lou, are you asking that once we have another workshop, will there be consultation? Is that what you're asking? Just before I...
Sorry, I'm referring to, I suppose, the idea of a working group with the community to bring information back to us.
Through the chair. I'm not sure yet. I think that's what we need to work through with members, revisit the original intent and objectives of reviewing these services, and then we'd know what consultation or what working groups or key stakeholders would be involved in from there.
So, any other questions for clarity? Not part of the process of voting, just for clarity so you understand what's in the report. So we'll do recommendation 1 first. So is there a mover for that? Councillor Miller, and do you wish to speak to it?
I do, Your Worship. And we're just receiving and noting this. I really was pleased with the response from the community. However, I think it was restricted to very local, and this is not a criticism, it's just the way that I read and went through every submission. They seemed very heavily along the south coast. And I think perhaps, and that's understandable because it's probably those people that will be impacted the most. But I think the questions that we asked perhaps might have drawn the attention of our wider community if we had said something along the lines of, community, if we could save you $281,000 every year, how do you feel about that? Or if we'd said, if we could more evenly allocate council resources, how would you feel about that? I think it would have grabbed their attention more, because this was very, the questions didn't really force you to have read the services review document. So you could just read what was on my say. I also think it was very heavily geared towards social media, which is it's an observation that I have about all the consultation that we do. I noticed in the Fleurieu Sun last week, there's a survey of federal issues. I would love to see us do something like that because not everybody is on social media, and I don't believe we saw an engagement plan for this. We considered this in confidence in October. Then it got released from confidence on the 9th of January and consultation started, and I don't believe that we had a communication plan or engagement plan shared with us. So I really enjoyed and appreciate the feedback that we received, but I am not 100% certain it has garnered the feedback, because everybody in the council district who pays rates is potentially impacted by what the next decision is that we make. So I do think we could have improved it slightly, but and I don't think it was rushed. I think we as a chamber endorsed the process. It just didn't happen as quickly as we thought it was going to happen. So I think we need to take some responsibility for that, not administration. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Gardner?
Speak to it. Our community has done something quite wonderful, I think, in terms of really thinking about what's important for our town, this town, Goolwa. And I think what many people have done when they put in their feedback was think not necessarily about economics. They've thought about people and community. And community and people, in my estimation, comes before economics. Economics is very important, but it's not as important as people. And so if you look at the old post office as the visitor information session, 67, I think, % of our community have said, no, we don't want it down in Signal Point. It will spoil the bottom part of Signal Point. We do not need it down there. And somewhat disappointingly, from my point of view, because I think our arts community is incredibly important. 45% said yes, 45% said no. But it's still a lot of our community that want to have the old police station left as an art-related, community-related centre. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be run by council, because if you remember correctly, we had a perfectly beautiful EOI which suggests something quite different, and that it's run by community. I can't see any reason why that can't go ahead. So I'm pleased that our community has spoken about these two buildings so eloquently, and I'm happy to second the motion.
So is there any further discussion? So Councillor Miller, you can... Yeah, I think I'll just agree with Councillor Gardner. I don't think sometimes some people recognise the importance of art in this community, and that applies to Strathalbyn and everywhere else. We've got an art gallery in Strathalbyn that does extremely well, the Station Masters Gallery, and currently running a David Dryden, Barry Humphries mini expedition, which is great. So it's very important, and I think it's wise that we have another good look at it and think about it. So, Councillor Miller, you...
Thank you, Worship. I thought we were just receiving and noting the outcomes of the consultation, so I will have I'll speak to those other points next. But just in closing, and because it's been mentioned, I think, there's recently been a benefactor to the library, State Library, I think, or the Art Gallery, sorry, of $10 million. You know, I'd love it if there was a community member down here who would be so gracious and generous. But just to the point of 67 people who responded, let's just not forget that we have 19,861 ratepayers, 30,323 residents as at 30th of June 23 or 24, I can't remember which year it was. So it's 67% of who responded. And I'm just speaking to the points about how we do community engagement in this council. We need to somehow reach more of our community when we do these consultations. So I'm not questioning the decision that we're going to make is next. This is just receiving and noting, and so that's why I'm limiting my comments to the feedback that we have received. Thank you.
That ends the discussion on recommendation 1, so I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. So we go to recommendation 2. So is there a mover for recommendation 2? Councillor Livingston. You must talk to it.
Yes, thank you. I would also like to move it with a slight change in point 1. So I would like to say hold a council workshop by the end of June 2025 to revisit council service review objectives, and also, and I'm happy to take advice, but I think it's really important that we invite key stakeholders to our workshop as well, just like we did with the Pontoon, and to actually get a meaningful discussion and consultation from them for that workshop. So, yeah, I'm happy with that, with the intent that it is proactive engagement with key stakeholders ahead of the workshop, if that is what will happen, if that's included.
So is there a seconder for that? Councillor Gardner?
Can I speak to it now?
I thought you were speaking. Keep going. Oh.
Okay. I just wanted to start by saying I'm glad that we're taking this approach. In my view, I think these decisions in relation to the VIC and with SCRAC are completely different and shouldn't be linked, and I would like that to be considered when we do have a workshop about this. I also think that we need to consider the connection that these two buildings provide between the main street and the Wharf Precinct area. After being at Signal Point last week for a function, I just personally can't see a way in which we can incorporate the VIC Centre into Signal Point. Another point is that I think that we really need to consider is that the art gallery at the old police station and the art gallery at Signal Point are two very completely different services to our community, and that's why I think that the engagement with our key stakeholders is so important. I would also like us to consider the cost savings without having to move the services between buildings, and a main reason why I'm saying that is I would hate for us to be in a position again like we have had in the past where we've got empty buildings for the sake of saving money, and I think that that's not a focus and not a number one priority in my view. And I think having these workshops in June is also very important, as I think it's also an important consideration into the 25-26 budget for all of us to consider. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, you were second again? Yes. You wish to speak to it? Is there any discussion from anybody else? Councillor Coomans.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Park. Look, I do support that, and particularly the last few words in number 1, in inviting key stakeholders. What we do need to sort out, though, is how they are to contribute to the workshop. And when we had the Pontoon workshop, it was we had quite a few members in the audience who were part of that Pontoon and the support for it, and we actually invited them to make a short presentation, and that seems to have worked pretty well. I wouldn't like them to have a seat at the table, but I would like them to be invited to participate maybe with a presentation or something like that. I think that will make the whole thing a lot more worthwhile.
Any further discussion? Councillor Maidment.
Well, I won't be supporting this. I mean, we have these service reviews for a reason. We've identified some significant savings, and we've got a lot of pressure on our rates. And where we can save money, we should be doing it. Visitor information centres are going the way of drive-in theatres in regional Australia. The visitor information centres are there presently to hand out information for events or attractions in your area. But I can tell you now that most people these days are just using Google off their phone to find out what's the 5 best attractions or things to do, say, in Goolwa. And they don't need to pick up a brochure, they don't need to read out all of that. And it's interesting to note that the Mount Barker Council have closed the Harndorf Visitor Information Centre, which is one of the most visited townships in South Australia, and the Fleurieu region is also one of the most highly visited places in South Australia, mainly by day trippers, and they come and they go, and they've got a reason to come here. And everyone knows where Goolwa is in South Australia. So you don't need to promote it that widely with paper brochures. So I don't see why we're pausing on it. In terms of the Arts Centre, yes, you've got a council-supported arts centre with staff. Perhaps that could be rejigged and volunteer-based, like it is at Strathalbyn. That runs on the proverbial smell of an oily rag. And by the end of June, that means we cannot consider $281,000 in savings because it'll roll into the next budget process. So I won't be supporting this.
Any further? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move an amendment, please. And I did send through the wording of my amendment to administration. And once it's up there, I'll then speak to... So what I'm asking is, if we're going to pause, and I'm not happy that we're pausing, but I'll speak to that in a minute, then we need a report back to us in no later than a month following the workshop, for the very reasons that we're not going to have this reflected in our annual business plan for 25-26. There's no indication that at some budget review in the future of in the next 12 months we'll be reflecting some savings and efficiencies. So if we're going to pause, then I want some rigour around this, and I would also like it noted that there's an ongoing opportunity cost of $281,000 should we decide to retain the existing services for now. We gave direction on this back in October. My understanding was we were going to consult with the community, but whilst that was happening, we were going to take some certain other steps that in preparation for if this consultation had fallen the other way, we were ready to go, so that our budget for 25-26 would reflect this. So my amendment, and I would prefer to have the pause removed, but I know that's significantly different. So I'm just enhancing what Councillor Livingstone has proposed, that we do this if there's a pause, no later than 1 month, and we look at further service level savings. We note the opportunity cost, and if you can just scroll down a little bit, we note that the consultant who did this review pointed out that across Australia there are no other councils of a similar size and location to Alexandrina who run 2 galleries, and I'd like, within 150 metres of each other, but I'm happy to leave that there, that there are a very high number of community and commercial art galleries in our region. And the other point that I would like to add, a point C, sorry, I forgot to put this on, that council's art resources are currently concentrated in Goolwa. So this is the amendment that I'm asking. It's just enhancing what Councillor Livingston has been able to move. Yes, thank you. Sorry. Oh, yes, part C is that council resources are concentrated in Goolwa. I just want people to note that. And I just need to stress that I'm certainly not questioning the value of art, the contribution that it makes, none of that. But we are under pressure. And we set this review in motion last year so that we could hopefully reflect it. This review was received in July and August, these 2 reviews, because we haven't done the performing arts yet, with the intent that we had a year to sort this out and would reflect it in our 25-26 budget. And here we are in March, no hope, if this gets up, of having it reflected in our 25-26 budget. So that means we roll into another year of a very obvious saving and efficiency and consolidation to one business model that we could have had, that once we get ourselves back on track, we could have unwound. But I'm disappointed that we started this process a year ago, well, not quite a year ago, but in I think it was around about this time, because the tenders went out and had to be closed by the 30th of June last year. So then the reviews were done and we got them in July and August. And here we are making decisions to pause. And I just don't think, I think our community expects a bit more from us. So I'm hoping this amendment will be supported, just so that we're flagging. Community, we know we have an opportunity here, and we may let it, there's a cost coming with pausing. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for the amendment? So the amendment will lapse through want of a seconder, so we go... Sorry? Oh, I'll ask you again just in case you didn't hear me. Do we have a seconder for that? No. So again, it will lapse through want of a seconder. So we go back to the original wording of the recommendation. So is there any further discussion on that? Or I give Councillor Livingston, I'll just say, all I would say is the reason why there are 11 art galleries around the place is because we're focused on the arts. We attract artists, and that's why they want to come here. And we've been to our community. We need to sit and think about what they've said to us. You can't do that in a couple of weeks. And we need to look at why. Where's the 281,000? Why don't we look at empowering our volunteers to run it? And it costs, and then there you'll save the 280,000. What you haven't told us, and I haven't heard, is where are the people that we're going to pay the 281,000? Where are they going to go? Because you can't put them off. You've still got them. So that's part of their EB. So certainly find something else that's constructive for those people to do, but let's empower our volunteers. That's what they're there for, and they really want to do it, and that saves us money, and we can keep these things going. So Councillor Livingston, do you wish to have your right of reply? So I'll put the recommendation to. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. So we go to... Go to 9.2, which is consultation feedback summary on the sale of the Customs House. That's Stacey, do you wish to add anything to that report? So there are two recommendations there. We can move them separately, or It's up to you. We'll just receive them. We'll do them separately. So recommendation 1 is to receive a note. So Councillor Miller. Yeah.
Oh, sorry if I missed the questions for clarification. I just wondered if we could bring forward the recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee about Customs House before we consider this item.
Leave of the chamber to rearrange the agenda. So all those in favour? In favour? Against? So we'll rearrange it. So we need to go to page 327 of your agenda. So that's in section 10, which is committee reports, and 10.1 is a report from the Heritage Advisory Committee regarding the sale of the Customs House. There's a recommendation there before you. Is there a mover for that? Move, Councillor Maidment. Do you wish to talk to it? Seconded, Councillor Livingston. Is there any discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Sorry, yeah, look, was there any text in the minutes of the Heritage Advisory Committee in relation to why they came to that conclusion?
Sarah? Yep, Sarah, you going to give us that? Yep.
Through the chair, I don't believe there was, because the minutes are there to capture the decision that was made, not the verbatim that went back and forth.
I can make a comment. Got it. It sort of shows the shortcomings of our minutes where it doesn't actually reflect what was sort of discussed and the pros and cons for their decisions. So what we don't know is whether it was all to do with the Customs House, maybe if it was sold, that it would be demolished, and that's never been a question. But I understand, or I think the community is under the impression that if it is sold, it will probably be destroyed. But that certainly would not be the case. It's very well protected. And I look at some of the other examples. Mount Lofty House is in private hands. It is a magnificent structure up there. There are pages and pages on the database of the Heritage Register that show, in all of Alexandrina's towns, that show various buildings in private hands, and all of them are being looked after, and in fact they apply for heritage grants and what have you. So the fact that it's in council hands or in private sector hands, these buildings are protected, so I don't think that's really an issue. So I would have liked to have known why they came to that conclusion, and I guess it just shows the shortcomings of minutes where reasons and some discussion is not included in them. It's only just the recommendations.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a member of the Heritage Advisory Committee, from my recollection, the majority it was actually a unanimous decision, and the majority of people who spoke at the meeting knew very well that the building was not going to be torn down. They knew that the building was going to stay there because it's on heritage land. Part of the reason that some people wanted to keep it was to ensure that it stayed in community hands, and that it was used by community. So, and it was clearly obvious by the community consult that many people wanted it to stay in community hands and for it to be used by a community organisation, either the community centre in Goolwa or by some other community organisation. And the reason for that is because it's also part of the wharf. It's an integral part of the wharf. The Customs House was built specifically to be used at the wharf. They collected the money from the goods that came down the river. So in 1859, when it was built, it was part of the wharf, and it still is part of the wharf, and people want it kept that way. Imagine a hotel there, surrounded by buildings 2-storey high. It would dwarf that dwelling. It would be inappropriate to have a hotel there, and frankly, it's been for sale since 2016, and there has not been one hotelier who has been able to, either provide guarantee that the building would stay as it is and be restored, or that anyone else would want it, or any other hotelier would want it, because it's simply not a big enough area for 80 rooms of a hotel, plus all its other buildings that are necessary to support 80 bedrooms. So it's very important that we remember that. And the Heritage Advisory Committee, we're all quite clear that it should stay in community hands.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Worship. For better or worse, I think it requires acknowledgement that this recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee would have been really valuable before our decision in October last year. So I'm glad to see that we've got that important committee giving us a recommendation now. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? So before Councillor May's right of reply, I'll just say, I think I fully support what you say. The Heritage Advisory Committee is there. We've chosen those people, selected, because they know what they're doing and they're going to give us good advice. But I think it was unfortunate that, a bit like Sugar's Beach, the photograph that went out, what was proposed for the site, depicted a building half wrapping around a 2-storey building. We have been through this process before, and we did have community support to sell it and put accommodation on the site. It was totally different. It was only 23 beds, enough to take a busload of people. And I think if we went back to that process, that would help. It would help people like groups like our Heritage Advisory Committee and also our community understand that we're not heritage vandals. We do love and respect our heritage, and the reason why that original contract and offer to buy and do that development fell through was because we were of the opinion that we were going to lose the opportunity to have total control over what happened on that site. And we didn't want the damage of every site. What was proposed was beautiful. It blended in with Scotland, and the house was retained in Splendor as it is, but fully all within the guidelines of heritage. But I can understand why the committee did. I'm sorry, it's gone on. I can understand why the committee thought and resolved the way they did and support that. So, Councillor Maidment, you wish to speak? No. So that ends the discussion. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. So now we can go back to page 99. 9.2, which is consultation on the feedback summary on the sale of the Customs House. We might as well do, I think after that, doing that one, we might as well just do 1 and 2 together. Happy with that, Councillor Livingston? You move that? Seconder, Councillor Maidment.
Yeah. May I speak to it?
Yeah. You should. Yeah, just tell me when you move it. You want to speak to it. You can,
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor Parkes. It is clear that there is an overwhelming opposition to the sale of Customs House. 83% of the responses received. This shows just how important community consultation is and just how important this asset is to the community. I'm also very glad that the Heritage Advisory Committee had an opportunity to provide Council with their recommendation on the proposed sale. I agree with Councillor Nicholson that this should have happened before the decision came to the Chamber last year. In my view, we have a duty to protect our assets for our future generations, and this is a prime example. We also have a duty to protect our heritage. This asset is in the heart of Goolwa and is a key part of the Wharf Precinct area. This recommendation will allow us time to properly consider the future of Customs House. In my view, as an asset owned by Council, it is an asset owned by the community, and it is important that our community is on board with its future use. I will be advocating for this asset to be reclassified as community land to eliminate there being any doubt in the future that public consultation when dealing with this asset is a requirement and is not discretionary. When we have our workshop, I would really like to see that Council members provided with all relevant information about this building, including complete information about its condition and work required to be undertaken. It is clear that community want this building to be used and not to remain empty. It is also clear from the community consultation that protecting our heritage is paramount. I just wanted to read one of the sentiments that are not in support of the sale. It is from a Malang resident. It says, the historic Customs House building, circa 1859, is a very important part of the state's heritage and early river trade. Therefore, our society would like to see that area remain in Alexandrina Council control for the benefit of the community and for future generations. I urge the Chamber to support this recommendation and allow us further time to properly consider Customs House future, including its protection, with our community for our community.
Councillor Maidment, you're seconding it. Do you wish to speak to it?
It's interesting to note the Matthews Group of hotels has purchased the Cryo, and they also own the Australasian. Now, there are significant players in the hotel development business. You'd think if this site of Customs House was fit for purpose for their organisation, that they might have even made a pitch for it. So I defer now to all the My Say and the ratepayers who've said that we should retain it for its heritage value, and also agree with Councillor Gardner, whose recollections of that Heritage Advisory Committee meeting were very clear. So they unanimously supported the retention of Customs House, and yes, I think we should stop wasting money on consultants, and let's just move forward and put it into the hands of a community organisation.
So, any further discussion, Councillor Miller?
I have questions before I speak, Your Worship. Why was it only the minutes that were released from the 21st of October meeting?
Thank you, through the chair. At this stage, it was suggested to keep it in confidence because there's a lot of commercial and confidence information about the hotel reconnaissance project that was done around what different suppliers and vendors might be able to provide. So that can still be challenged if members wish. However, for now, we believe that still needed to be in confidence.
I just have a question about why we rolled these in together, because I thought we had an agreement, or I thought it was understood that when we were having community consultation, we would receive a note so that we could talk about the consultation. Is that not what we're going to do in future? There was no opportunity for questions of clarification on this item. You just sort of move and seconded straight away. I'm just trying to understand where we capture that is the standard approach, so that we can talk about consultation first and then make our decision. And I haven't spoken yet because I'd just like to understand why that happens for some and not others.
Through the Mayor, if you'd like. Administration have set the recommendations out in the agenda to that. I don't believe that is a written rule as part of our code of practice. Obviously, the mover moved all 3 items at once. When we do our code of practice review, certainly we could look at formalising that, so that is the procedure followed, but it's up to the chairperson to chair the meeting.
And that's what we're doing now. We're discussing it. You're asking questions, and we're also discussing it, a whole lot of it. So there's nothing missed in the process. So is there any further discussion on this, Councillor Gardner?
Your Worship, I am concerned that we leave this to the end of June before coming back to discuss it. And my reason for being concerned is that if we leave this, a community organisation will have signed a lease with their current lessor for a further year, and this building has been empty for 10 years. This building could have been in community hands in 2023. They could have already started the grant funding hunt to restore the building. We would have saved ourselves $30,000 a year in lease. So do we want to keep on waiting and wasting money when we're talking about saving $280,000? So to be perfectly honest, I think we should bring it forward, this workshop, certainly by the end of April if we can, so that if we have a community organisation, and we know we have, that would like to move into it, they could do so. The other thing that I think is really important is that we do need to negotiate with NAC, the Nudunjeri Aboriginal Corporation. We have not consulted them in this round. We may have consulted them in 2016. That's 9 years ago. We need to consult with our Aboriginal elders around this issue because it is on Nudunjeri land. It's very important that they understand what we do with this piece of land. So I think they need to be consulted. We perhaps need to bring them into the workshop as well when we have it. So I am absolutely thrilled that there was 83% of our population who wanted this very important piece of history in community hands.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mayor. There certainly are pros and cons in regard to the sale of this property, which isn't currently rated as community in its classification, and there's a lot of emotion about it too. There are also, the more you look into it, and we've seen from the community, there's lots of other opportunities too that it could be appropriate to consider. So I think given all of this emotion and all of the school of thought, which has been fantastic, it is appropriate to pause and to consider all of the options, as is also appropriate to consider the entire leveraging or commercialisation of the wharf. So I'll certainly welcome it. And I also think that it is appropriate, and our number one priority should be, at this time, to work through the findings of the ASCOSA report. These are material and significant to us, and appropriate to work through and finalise our budget. So I will be supporting the recommendation or the motion as suggested, and I look forward to a very holistic view at all the options available. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I do think this is wise to pause, and I didn't have an issue with any other part of this except that I would have liked to have been able to speak about receiving and noting and deal with that separately. To Councillor Gardner's point, I do think in point 3, note a report will be presented to a future meeting. Well, when's that? That could be a year away. I would like to see a future meeting or future replaced with within 1 month of the workshop. Because to the point of, if there are other things that can be done with this, we need to sort that out and close the loop on this site, whatever the future holds for it. I've been delighted and overwhelmed with the community response to this and the contact that came. This was a decision about hearts and minds for me, and hearing people speak about it has been, you know, it makes you truly appreciate the privilege that you have of being a council member. So I don't have any issue with pausing on this one, but I would like to see a date of when we will be coming back to talk about this in the chamber, because I think, and without that, sure, we can have a workshop by the end of June, but then when will we? So I'm not changing anything. I'm just speaking to, it's up to the mover and secretary if they want to put a date in there, but I always get nervous when I see a future meeting, because that's like how long's a piece of string. So I just hope that there is commitment to bring this forward as soon as possible after the workshop, whenever that workshop is held, because there is so much interest in this that I think we need to commit to something, or by when.
Councillor Scott.
Yes, I realise the evening's drawing on. I'll be quick. I think it's very clear that the community recognise that it's an important part of our heritage. We know that it is, and I can see no reason why we should be delaying. I think Councillor Gardner raised a good point with the end of financial year looming. Let's just get on and finalise the whole thing, and so that it can go into community hands and live on in the manner in which 83% of our district want it to be, or those responding want it to be.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Livingston, you're in the debate. I just think it's, before I hand it back to you, you'll close it, a question.
I'm just noting what other members of the chamber are saying. Is it possible, as the mover, to make the 2 changes in respect of the workshop date and the meeting date?
Yeah, so that's a variation. So you need to support get the support of the seconder and seek leave of the meeting. So is the seconder happy with that? Yeah. So what about all those in favour of changing the dates? We'll just get it up there first.
One month after the workshop.
So Andrew's just saying we just want clarity around what you're actually asking for.
It's up there now, so the workshop by the end of April, and it to come back to the chamber within a month of that workshop.
So you're happy with that? So the chamber, all those in favour of that? So, yep, so that's okay, that's carried. So any further discussion? So I agree with Councillor Oliver. This is it's an important asset, not something to rush into. It's costing us nothing to have it sit there for a few more months. We're not saving any money by rushing out and doing it. What we're doing is giving our community more time for us to talk to them and think about it. We've already consulted, remember, prior to this, on what our community thought the options of usage we could go with it. And they didn't really support community use. They wanted to see a return on it, but they wanted to keep the building. And from a financial aspect for our ratepayers, if we can do something that gives us a return, we should be really looking at it seriously, and we can't just jump into it straight away just because a potential organisation has got to sign a new lease. This is a really important decision. But Councillor Livingston, do you wish to sum up? I'll put the recommendations to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. So 9.3 is the Horseshoe Bay Pontoon updates. Councillor Livingston, you're declaring conflict of interest?
Yes, I'm declaring material conflict of interest due to a related party, and I will leave the chamber.
So 9.3 is the Horseshoe Bay Pontoon update, and there's a recommendation there with 5 dot points.
Mayor, can we have questions and updates?
Sorry, first, Alan's not here, but no. So are there any questions for clarity? I do mean clarity.
Yeah, look, I've got a question. Sorry, man. Mayor, I've got a question on clarity. In clause 1B, it says ensure weekly visual inspections are undertaken 7 days a week. I think what we're meaning to say is ensure inspections are undertaken on a weekly basis.
So it is, the Lee's just telling us the requirement is weekly. So it's not every day, it's once a week.
Yeah, that's why I suggest it's done, undertaken on a weekly basis, rather than 7 days a week,
If I may, through the Mayor, I'm sorry, I believe that was a typo initially. There was a mistake that it said daily, so thank you for picking that up. We'll remove that now for administration.
And one other one, just a technical one, licence is C in Australia. It's a noun, not a verb.
Councillor Gardner, did you have a question? Or... So we have the recommendation there with 5 dot points. So is there a mover for that? Move, Councillor Nicholson.
I'll speak to it, if I may, briefly.
Yep.
We've had a lot of discussion in this chamber in workshops, and the community have been really strong in their positive response to the work that this chamber has done in collaboration with the community and organisations to get the pontoon back in. So I just want to acknowledge and state again that I think this is just such a brilliant example of how council can work together with our community to deliver outcomes that are really important and think of novel solutions. So this has been, this is the outcome of many months of hard work, and I'm so glad that we're here making this decision tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to second it, Mayor Parks. The only one I have a little bit of a question on is the number 3, where the acceptance of funding from the member for Finnis, there's nothing in there about the conditions. There was going to be something about firming up that contribution. The details of the contribution offered by the local state member needs to be affirmed.
Through the chair, so David Basham has committed in writing up to $10,000 and to draw down on that $10,000 as costs are incurred for the pontoon. So we do have that in writing as a commitment from David Basham. And the recommendation there is just that I work with him and in negotiating, each of those opportunities, I guess, is all that's saying.
Yeah, another question. It was raised at the workshop that we do have a state election and what happens if he was not to be successful in terms of that contribution.
Through the chair, David Basham's been very clear that it's his own personal funds and not that of the electoral office.
So, is there any further discussion, Councillor Middleton?
Just very quickly, just to that point then, should MP be removed if it's private, or does it not really matter? I'm just trying to understand if there's any clarification that is actually needed here. My other point, just very quickly, I think our council, whether rightly or wrongly, has had to do all the heavy lifting on this situation. We're not the only council in the state that has pontoons. Yet we've had to endure quite a lot, as has our community, to get to this point. I'm really pleased to see a recreational pontoon policy, very happy to adopt that, and I would imagine that there'll be plenty of other councils with pontoons who, if they haven't read our agenda, they'll be reading it very soon, and I just wish to congratulate everybody involved. I think with all the angst that we had initially, I think we've landed in a very good spot. And sometimes you do have to go through that and test and ask questions and push back, and I think this is a great outcome. It should have been a state-led initiative as far as I'm concerned, and I acknowledge the work that Mayor Parkes has done and the Coastal Councils Association. I've got the acronym wrong for that, but it's landed in a really positive situation, and it's win-win for everyone. So well done to everybody involved.
Any further discussion? No. Yeah, we should, not me, thank Adam Gray from the South Australian Coastal Councils Alliance for setting up the meeting with the mutual liability scheme and negotiating on behalf of all the councils with pontoons satisfactory insurance coverage. So that was a really important step. Councillor Nicholson, did you wish to use your right of reply? No. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. So can we get Councillor Livingston back, please? Thanks. So 9.4 is regarding a little Corella management. Lee, is there anything needed on that? So are there any questions for clarification on that? Councillor Nicholson.
Can I clarify whether the environmental strategies to deter little Corellas are considered in our sort of field management, such as, planting around water sources?
Through the chair, they are considered as part of that policy, yes.
So, are there any other questions for clarity? not the context of the item. So is there a mover? Move, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Worship. May I speak?
Speak to it, yeah.
I'm really glad to see this report coming to us tonight. I moved a motion requesting some information come back to the Chamber in December 2023, so this has been a long time coming, and initially that was prompted by a passionate community member who has done a lot of work in making sure that this is brought to the attention of Council. I was also at that time presented with the idea of potential new technology such as chirp. Since the motion in December 2023, this has frequently been raised with me by members in our community. People are really interested to know what is the outcome of that motion, what is Council doing, and let me know how important and the impact of little Corellas, what the impact is on them. You just have to walk down Laurie Lane or spend time at Goolwa Oval, where they enjoy climbing and chewing the new nets behind the football goals, and attend many places within Alexandrina where they spend more time, to know that it is a significant issue, and I couldn't imagine my stress if they regularly visited my property. So it's not an insignificant issue. I'm really glad to see this report come back to us. I think it's great for our community to see the active role that Council is taking in trying to move the little Corellas on, and our ongoing advocacy with the state government, because this is a broad state issue. So I look forward to continuing. I look forward to Council continuing to advocate for improvements in little Corella management. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder? Councillor Oliver. Any discussion? Councillor Scott.
Chairman, Your Worship, I like little Corellas. I think they're a lovely little bird, and they are. I like sitting watching them. I also like all sorts of other animals too, and I note that when animals get into plague proportions, that we have to take pretty dramatic actions to curb them. We start off with mice in our own houses and rats in the shed, and then we move on to goats in the Flinders Ranges and kangaroos across Australia. When they get into plague proportions, you can get a permit to shoot kangaroos in this area, and that will have to happen very soon, because they're just hundreds of them now down here. Brumbies in the Northern Territory, camels in the Northern Territory, and also horses and cattle, I believe, in the Snowy Mountains. This is done to stop the degradation of the country in which they stand. And you only have to go to the northern, up to the northern part of South Australia and witness what happens when you get an overabundant species and you get a drought happening. I think people should just take a reality check and picture seeing kangaroos dying of starvation and lack of water, and other animals doing the same because of the degradation and overabundance. And I think somewhere along the line, unpalatable as it is, I think that we're going to have to not go on and see towns being degraded, infrastructure, I believe, they attack electrical infrastructure, all sorts of things, ovals, bowling greens, everything. I think somewhere we've got to put a peg in the sand and say we've done everything we can, and we're going to have to resort to eliminating them. And that can be done with the government supervision. The government has got a veterinary surgeon I know of that goes regularly to the Flinders Ranges to shoot goats. And I'm not sure I can see much difference between a herd of goats doing damage in there and a flock of corellas tearing this area apart. And I think somewhere along the line, the authorities, and whether it's through the Southern Hills local government or through the Department of Environment, but someone has to bite the bullet, unpalatable as it is.
Councillor Maidment.
I'll support this recommendation, but I don't think it goes far enough. If you go down the main street of Strath on a Monday morning, you see our council workers cleaning up all the debris from the trees that the Corellas have stripped over the weekend. I think we need to put more money into our, other than a 0.25 FTE, I'd like to see that go up to 1, because I think the other side of the coin is the cost to us for labour to go and rectify all the problems that these Corellas create. Council will only look after its own infrastructure, and I understand that, and it's up to the individual property owners, householders to move the Corellas on. In Langon Creek, I don't think you see a Corella. Now, there'd be a reason for that, and I don't want to go down that path, but you can't eradicate Corellas in townships because it's not a very nice sight, and you can't shoot them or poison them, because it was back in the 90s that council did poison Corellas in Strathalbyn, and but they also poisoned lorikeets and rosellas and all the other birds that are around, so that's why that process stopped. So I'd like to see more money thrown at the FTE. And the gentleman that does this work, I know personally, he does a great job for Strathalbyn in the Central Park and the Oval particularly, and which helps us keeping. And also the other thing is, we just removed trees out of the Central Park in Strath, and the cost to replace those must have been huge. So I think we look at the other side of the coin, where we need to spend more money moving them on.
Any further? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. And just on the cost of this is a community problem. I agree with what Councillor Scott said. When you get to plague proportions, you do have to take intervention measures. It's not just a cost to council here. There's a huge cost to the community. The Strathalbyn Cricket Club put a new oval a new pitch in the oval at Strathalbyn School, because they have to use that because there aren't enough ovals, and that was $20,000 2 years ago, and it's destroyed, completely destroyed. So the damage that it does to the protective cushions around the goalposts. They put out little oval markers for sports day. You can't do that the night before because they're gone, they're destroyed. There's a huge community cost here. Whether you like little Corellas or not, I think we're above that now, and sometimes it looks like it's snowing, or it's snowed all over the ovals in Strathalbyn, and you clap your hands and it's, you feel like you're in a Hitchcock movie. So I think this is really good. We've got to keep advocating for this and pushing. We'll make some unhappy, some happy. That's just the way it is, but we've got to keep doing something. Doing nothing is not an option.
Any further discussion? No. Before you do, I'll just say it's not just Alexandrina, it's Australia-wide, this problem. They're on the East Coast, they're in Western Australia. Western Australia already started a selective baiting program. They've developed a bait which other birds are not taking, and they monitor where they place the bait, and they collect the bait after the feed. So there are things happening. It's a state government, for us, it's a state government issue. There's no point us trying to clear every Corella in Alexandrina so that the ones from Onkapringa can come over the hill and have a party because there's lots of room. And they're wrecking everything. Lots of infrastructure, you name it, they're wrecking it. And I think there's a health issue as well. Yeah. So I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. unanimously. Therefore, move on to 9.5, which is the holding of council meetings away from the Goolwa Council Chamber, and there's a recommendation with 2 dot points there. Moved Councillor Miller. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm not going to speak at length. I think this is just asking that we consider it when we go to public consultation, if I'm understanding correctly how this is worded. So I please hope that you'll support at least just asking our community if they're willing to support this and fund it. That's all that this is asking. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder? Councillor Nicholson. Any discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Good. Got it. I thought this was asking for resources. It says whether to allocate resources for council meetings in venues other than Goolwa. Is that not what the intent of this motion is? So when we're considering the budget, we're looking at providing some funding to hold meetings in Strath. And I've opposed this in the past. I will oppose it now. I'd rather we spend that sort of money, and it's about 5,000 plus. I'd rather use that sort of money to support our community-owned centres. I don't see the need to have meetings in other locations. The other one is, I'd rather, again, if there's some money available, I'd rather look towards live streaming all of our meetings. I think that would be much more beneficial, because then every resident, no matter where they live, can just dial it up and watch us live. I reckon that's a much better way of doing things. And if we're going to spend some money, then I'd rather we allocate that money to that rather than having a meeting in Strath. So I don't support this.
Any further discussion? Councillor Scott.
Just a question. It's only to consider when determining whether we allocate. So it's not as if we are allocating. It's only considering this report when we're working out whether we will go somewhere. This, all that's listed here, they want us to consider before we put up a hand and say we'll put in $5,000.
So is there any further discussion? Councillor Miller, all I'll say to you is we've got a chief executive, we've got a CFO, and we've got an executive team working God knows how many hours trying to prune stuff out of the budget. And we're saying stop spending money and stick to basics, and we want to spend money before we even get there. For goodness sake, we've got to pull it back. We can't be doing anything that we're not doing already, and we have to look at what we're doing and start reducing it where we can without affecting our residents. So if you have your right of reply.
I have a question of clarification, please. If we support this, will it be included in the budget for consultation? I just want to understand the wording that I've moved here, because I've read it as receive and note the report and include it in the annual business plan and budget. So can you just please, I should have sought this clarification before, but are we resolving here to ask the community in the annual business plan and budget if they want to allocate $3,000 or whatever it was to hold a council meeting away from the chamber once a year? Is that what this is asking?
Through the chair, the recommendation there is for council members to consider, as part of the business plan and budget deliberations, that is in our workshops initially, whether or not council members want to include some additional budget to allow council meetings to be held in other locations. So council members need to raise this as part of the business planning and budget process through the workshops to provide some indication to administration as to whether or not they want something like this considered. That will then progress through to formal decisions of council in terms of releasing a plan for community consultation and ultimately adopting a plan.
Do you wish to have your right of reply?
I have another question. So if this doesn't get supported now, does that mean I can't raise this in a workshop? And if I want it in the budget and annual business plan, or anything else for that matter, workshops don't make decisions. So we've already seen that we get a feel from a workshop and then that translates to something that comes to council. I am seeking some way or other to ask our community if they are prepared to spend this money.
Now, that's not a question. You've asked the question. Now let the answer be given, please.
If this motion is carried, I don't see it as preventing a council member from raising, as part of the business plan and budget process, a suggestion in terms of additional budget. Yeah, if this is not supported, it can't prevent, I don't believe, a member from raising other budget considerations, or even in relation to this matter, budget considerations as part of the business plan and budget process.
Right, now, you wish to have a right of reply?
It was supported last time, maybe it wasn't unanimous, that a report come back about this. The report's come back, and I read this report as we will be putting this in the annual business plan and budget to ask the community. So really, I don't understand what number 2 means. It would be just receiving and noting the contents of the report, because there'll be another opportunity. So I just want the community to have the opportunity to formally comment on this. So I hope that it will be supported. It's harmless. It's not allocating resources. It's asking whether we're going to consider allocating resources, which just seems. I don't want to delay this meeting any longer over something like this. There is demand for this. There is incredible interest, and it's separate. It's completely unrelated to live streaming. It's people wanting to physically see and hear and participate and have that opportunity easily. So I don't know why we wouldn't ask them. I don't know why you wouldn't support this. So I hope that it does get supported. Thank you.
So that ends the discussion. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? 3. Against? That is carried. We move on to 9.6 is Council Committee Governance Improvement, and there is a recommendation there with 5 dot points. Question? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I did receive a question in relation to this. The issue was raised that the Heritage Advisory Committee was not consulted on their amended terms of reference. Could someone clarify that, please?
Through the Chair, can I ask the Manager of Governance and Communications to answer that question?
Through your worship, thank you for the question. My understanding is that at the committee meeting they were consulted and they did agree, but it wasn't done as a resolution.
Just to go back to the beginning, so I just asked Tash first, is there anything you wish to add to this? No. So is there any questions for clarity? You've asked one question for clarity, which is fair enough. No. So is there a mover for the recommendation? Move Councillor Scott. Seconded Councillor Oliver? Yep. Is any discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 9.7 is the draft public waste management policy. Lee, is there anything we need to add? No. Are there any questions for clarity on this one? Councillor Clemens.
Yes. Sorry, Mayor Park. Look, I did go through the policy, and I'm just wondering under definitions, the second dot point talks about paper and cardboard not being part of. It seems to be more of a note and a comment rather than a definition. I'm just wondering whether that's something that you would put in definitions as a dot point of a definition rather than just a note. I can give you the page, but I think you've probably found it.
Through the chair. So what the dot point's referring to is, it's really a matter of the way it's phrased. It's paper and cardboard that is not suitable for recycling because it is too small. It's not generalising that all paper and cardboard. It's suggesting that if it is too small, because and mentions sorries, or if it is contaminated, then it's not suitable. It's not suggesting that paper and cardboard are not suitable. So it's probably rephrased better. That makes sense?
That's it. So you wish to move it? Question?
Thank you, Worship. Often we do go to our community to consult on policies. This one was consulted with council members, Fleurieu and key internal administration stakeholders. Why didn't we consult with our community on this one?
Yeah, through the chair, often we consult on policies that are required to consultation by legislation, not necessarily all policies. This one is more of an operational policy and therefore hasn't been consulted at this point in time.
Councillor Scott, do you wish to move this?
I want to ask, sorry, you were doing clarity here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I want to ask a question in a minute.
Well, that's,
in relation to the clarity of the motion.
so let's try and get a mover first. Is there a mover for it? Oh, Councillor Nicholson.
I'll briefly speak, Your Worship. I am really happy to see this policy come to us, and I think it's important that we have this policy. I would like to see us be really proactive in communicating this to our public. In particular, the idea that the best recycling happens at home. We have so many members of our community, I have so many members of our community come to me saying, you know, what a priority it is to them that they and our and visitors are able to recycle in public. We've had a number of workshops, and I accept the reasons why recycling in public doesn't necessarily work, but it's so important that we communicate that to our public because other council areas do offer recycling in public. So if we aren't going to, I believe there is a risk to our reputation. So it would just be really important that we communicate that, and that could be through stickers on our public litter bins, and if we end up doing public organic bins, just I believe something like some stickers explaining why there's not a recycling bin there as well. But otherwise, this is an important policy because it's an important issue. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder? You're seconding it? Councillor Scott. Do you wish to speak to it as well? If you need to tell me if you do.
Yeah, sorry, I might wrap a question in there as well with it. The problem with with a lot of this stuff, we're bombarded by people during the holiday, particularly the holiday period. It's public, it's not necessarily public holiday, but I'm concentrating on the holiday where there's a mass of people with different attitudes, particularly holiday attitudes, where we get a lot of contamination. And what I'm wondering is, and I will do my own research, is how do they get on at the Royal Show? Because Royal shows across Australia have quite an advanced waste management program. And I think it would be interesting for us to see what they do and what the success rate is. Because, as I say, the problem with all this is the contamination. And while you set off with the best of intentions, you have the recycling bin there, and it doesn't take much of the wrong stuff to go in there for them to look at it and say, well, it's not worth going through sorting all that, straight into landfill. And that's the sad part of it. And very often those places are the places where there's quite high volume. So I'm just wondering, are there opportunities for us to refine the way we do this public waste business? And I just wondered whether we seek any sort of some information from the Royal Show movement across Australia, starting with Adelaide. They have one of the cleanest showgrounds in Australia, whether there's anything we can learn from that. That's all I want to say. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. Look, similarly, I don't accept the contamination argument. Many places I've been to, and I've travelled extensively, they are very well organised programs in public where they have recycling bins and they have little, keys and charts and stickers to get people to do the right thing. I think we're just saying no. So I'm going to be voting no. I still have the hope that one day, either through technology or service, we will be able to properly recycle public waste.
Further discussion? Councillor Miller?
I just have a question, and I did, when I was looking into this, I understand that the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority have it's separate but related, I think, that owners of and operators of holiday houses, it's their responsibility to get an extra bin service. If they don't, they're either putting it in public bins or relying on their residents to take them home. So I think in the high number of the point that Councillor Scott was making, I think, about people that come here in summer, there must be an impact on our public waste collection services if they're not paying for extra residential bin collection services. And I did get some stats, and I won't worry about them now, but I'm just trying to understand the relationship about public waste, because I'm sure when you have a high number of visitors over summer, there must be an impact on the public waste, and I think we did get some information on that. But so yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this. I just might hear some other views. Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Kermans.
I have a question first. The cans, the 10-cent deposit cans and containers, if council collects those, is it able to claim back the 10 cents on those? It is. I guess what I see around many other councils, they have a specified container, like a 44-gallon drum with a little spout on top, and it has some signage on it that says, your refundable 10-cent containers, put them in here. And it would seem to me that if we had some of those, we could even include schools and organisations to decorate them, do all sorts of jazzy things. And then when they come to the depot, all those containers are then worth money. There's going to be a little bit of other stuff in there as well. But at least, that all that can be recycled, and claiming the 10 cents back, I think that something like that would almost be self-funding. Is it something that we can have a look at?
Please, we take that on notice. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. We go to 9.8, which is the 2024-25 Capital Works Program Variation Request. Our Lee, anything changed? No. Are there any questions on clarification on this? No. So is there a mover? Move, Councillor Miller.
I'm just adding another point 3, please, Your Worship. And it's that, and I think the wording was provided, I know it was provided to me, I'm not sure if it's been provided to administration. It talks about, I'm asking that with our reseal budget, where we have this extra funds that are available, and I sought advice from administration regarding this, that we liaise with the Langhorne Creek Memorial Hall on the boundary realignment of a small triangular parcel of land outside the hall, which provides access to the council infrastructure, which is the toilet and dump point, and that's one of the initiatives that are listed in this report as being required as what we will be doing with this in this variation request. The dump point at the Langhorne Creek Hall needs to be upgraded. Part of that, there's this tiny parcel of land that is owned by the hall but used by the public and council to access this toilet and dump point. So if we could reseal that, there's an issue though because it's not council owned. So in discussions with the Secretary of the Hall, the President of the Hall today, it's been proposed by administration that a simple boundary alignment to put that little triangle of land into council ownership would solve this problem. And then, if I've understood this correctly, the sealing of that little parcel can happen as part of this project. And it's, if I've understood that correctly. So that's what I'm asking for some of these, as the scope for that project be expanded to incorporate this sealing of the little parcel of land that accesses this dump point. And I think it's getting late in the night and I probably haven't expressed that very well. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder? No, so the recommendation as changed will lapse through want of a seconder. So we'll go back to the original recommendation. So we're back to the original recommendation. So is there a mover for that? Councillor Maidment. Is there a seconder? Councillor Gardner. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Against? That is carried.
Question, Mayor Parks. We've been going for 3 hours now. Surely we deserve a break.
That's up to the chamber. I mean, I guess the people in the gallery wouldn't mind a break as well. You know, they'd like to go home. The length of the meeting is your hands, not mine. So I guess we'll seek the leave of the chamber. Do you wish to have a short break? Very short one. Short break, yes or no? I'm only seeing a few hands saying yes. So we'll have one. So it will be for 5 minutes. And I do seriously 5 minutes. We'll start at, in fact, we'll start at 8:35. Right, so we're up to Councillor Scott, if you'd like to be with us. We've started the meeting. Well, don't argue with me. It's too late for me to bother about arguing with you. 9.9 is the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority second quarter budget review 2024-25, and there's a recommendation that we approve that review. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Gardner? Is there a seconder? Councillor Miller? Is there any discussion regarding that report? If not, I'll put Councillor Maiden.
Can I speak now? Okay, thank you. So we see an increase of 512k in finance costs for FRAWA. Why aren't we getting regular updates on the ACM project, which I believe now is approaching about 14 million? So I think that we see these budget reviews and budget reports, and we don't see much detail in them. And can we get an ACM update at some stage, please?
So, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. I have a similar concern in regard to the ACM project, and I wonder whether it's not time and appropriate for us to formally review that and put on the work schedule for our Risk and Audit Committee, and enable full disclosure to that committee to be able to be made.
If I may, through the Mayor, Executive did meet with the Executive Officer of FRAWA most recently ahead of, because there already is an outstanding resolution from the Audit and Risk Committee to get a briefing on that. So we got a briefing as Executive, and our proposal will be to schedule a briefing for all of Council members and the Audit and Risk Committee. We think it might be more appropriate to do it together because you as Council probably want to be across that as well. So we will be scheduling that in the forward work plan.
Any further discussion on that report? Councillor Scott.
Yes, I'm just wondering about I'm trying to move fairly quickly here, the borrowings for the replacement of a truck. Now, I have some questions. Have we lost 2 trucks or have we lost 1 truck? Because my understanding is that there were 2...
Andrew will answer the question. Let Andrew answer the question.
Through you, Mayor. The borrowings that this report is referencing are borrowings that have already been approved by this council at a previous meeting. So this report is referencing the borrowings for the truck and an additional borrowings which was approved last month of also $500,000. 1 truck, 1 set of borrowings. The new borrowings that are in the resolution here are just moving monies around in the CAD facilities. 1 truck, 1 set of borrowings. It's just being reiterated in the FRAWA report.
Okay. Then, have we had another misfortune with another truck?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Right, okay. Just I see a different lot of trucks going past, pulling that semi-trailer.
Are you talking to
Anyway,
the meeting
thank you.
or to yourself, Councillor Scott? Thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 9.10 is the Fleurieu Aquatic Centre Joint Venture Quarterly Report. Stacey, is there anything changed? Are there any questions for clarification on this report? Not. I'll look for a mover for the recommendation. Move, Councillor Gardner. Seconder, Councillor Maidment. Is any discussion relating to it? Councillor Maidment.
So 5 years ago in this chamber, I said that this was a white elephant, this FRACA building, and I've got an interesting proposition that we sell it. And that back in those days, we were losing about 300k a year. Now we're up to about 500k a year. So over the next 10 years, that's $5 million, which will be returned to our ratepayers. And obviously Victor Harbour would be in the same position as well. So that's $10 million over 10 years, $1 million a year. This thing's only got a life of 20 years before it's going to be need to be renovated, fixed up, whatever. It cost $21 million, and we'd recoup that money over a 20-year period. And we'd actually get a value for it if it went into private enterprise. So we've had many initiatives over the years, the last 8 years, with little to no success in turning the centre to profit or mitigating against the enormous losses to date. So just think about it, and it'd be great to divest ourselves of, and I say it again, it's a white elephant, so let's get rid of it.
Is there any further discussion? Can you turn your microphone off? Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. 9.11 is the stamp duty advocacy, and there's a recommendation there before you. Is there a mover for that? Move Councillor Livingston. Seconder? Oh, sorry. Councillor Maidment. We didn't do the questions for clarity, but you can ask the questions now if you like. Any questions or any discussion? Not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 9.12 is the Youth Homeless Research Project. Stacey, is there anything to add? Are there any questions for clarity on this one? If not, I'll seek a mover. Moved Councillor Livingston. Seconded Councillor Nicholson. Is there any discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I just briefly want to express my delight in reading this report. I'm really pleased that we've been able to respond to the work that was already done in our community and look forward to moving forward. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Not, I will put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. 9.13 is the Local Government Infrastructure Partnership Program to do with the Strathalbyn Streetscape stages 3 to 8, and it's just signing and seal the grant deed of variation. There's a recommendation there before you. Move Councillor Miller. Yep.
Speak. I have a question first. I think I read in this report that the hall won't be finished in time for a council meeting in May. So my question is, when will this be finished?
Through the chair, it will be finished in May. So it's probably going to be mid-May before it's finished, but also there are lots of other things that's the construction of the hall itself. To make it suitable for a council meeting is a different matter.
So do you wish to speak to it?
Yes. I see this as just an administrative exercise here, and I'll just ask questions separately about the completion of the town hall and what that means for the May council meeting. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for it? Councillor Maidment. Any discussion? The recommendation, all those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. So we go to 9.14, which is the 2023-2028 Community Land Management Plan Amendments, a 6-monthly report, so it's from September 2024 to February 2025. Tash, is there anything we need to update? No? Are there any questions for clarity on this report? If not, we'll look for a mover. Move Councillor Oliver. Seconder, Councillor Livingston. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. So 9.15 is the Strategic Land Program Group 1. It's regarding Lot 4, Landseer Road, Malang. It's a straightforward revocation of title. Tash, is there anything you need to add to that?
Nothing further.
No. Are there any questions for clarity on it? So I'll put the recommendation there with 5 dot points. Is there a mover, Councillor Oliver?
Could I please request, however, that dot point number 5 be removed, as I believe any money from sale of assets should be going to reduce our debt.
Yep. So that's fine. There's the mover. Is there a seconder for that with dot point 5 removed? A question? Yep.
When we took this to the community originally, we have a policy, I believe, that talks about revenue from the disposal of land, but I just, something's ringing a bell that we committed that this would be used for local practices in Malang. I just need some clarity on that.
Through the Mayor, we haven't committed anything, but why the officer put that in as a recommendation is there was some feedback from some of the participants that suggested they would like to see the money reinvested, but there's been no commitment on council that we would do that.
So do we have a seconder?
Just for clarification, what, with 5 removed?
With 5 removed.
Oh, no.
So do we have a second, Councillor Thornton? Is there any discussion?
Look, I support 1 to 4, and I support the original 5 because I think if we do these sorts of things in a particular area, then it probably, to me, it stands to reason that we should try and expend those funds in that sort of area, not to take money from one area and then put it somewhere else. So, as a principle, I would like to see money raised in a particular area spent in the area. So I can't support this. I'd like to support it with 5 back.
So is there any further discussion, Councillor Maidment?
Fully concur with Councillor Coomans. I think there would be an expectation that we are taking money out of the area that should remain in the area. It's not that hard in our budgetary process to organise something that for Malang to the same value, whether it be a road or a footpath or something like that. Otherwise, we're going to sell off the crown jewels everywhere and bring it all into our major projects, which we have over capitalised on anyway. So it's not a big amount you'll get, and it would be good for the local community to think that that money was not lost to their community.
Any further discussion, Councillor Scott?
Yes, I agree with the previous 2 speakers. Thank you. Malang in particular works really hard to do what they do and improve the town as they do. I remember when we were talking about closing the roads, those short stubby roads in Clayton, that money was going to be spent back in the Port Elliot area, as I recall, improving playgrounds and that sort of thing. That was one of the suggestions. So I'm suggesting that we be consistent and not take it away. All we'll be seen to be doing is propping up the bigger towns, and I don't think that's fair.
Any Councillor Nicholson? Yeah.
Thank you. I agree with what has been said about at least giving an opportunity for that to be considered. So I foreshadow a motion where number 5 is restored. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? No. So I wouldn't mind getting Lachlan's advice on this. I asked a question some weeks ago about a potential piece of land that we could sell, and could that land be used to do something else in the same area, and was advised you can't really do that. That'd be a separate resolution. I can tell you the proposed land sale at Clayton of the 2 unmade road reserves had nothing to do with projects in Port Elliot. The money was to go towards the 3 surf lifesaving clubs. That's exactly what it was going to go for, $1 million. That was the plan, but it didn't happen because the community were against it, so we listened to them. So Councillor Oliver, do you wish to, your right of reply on this one?
I just think that if we're going to do that, I understand the intent that you have with that earmarking and geographical, mapping of the monies that are surplus. However, we don't have a policy which says that. So if someone wants to put up, I'd be happy to consider such a policy as a general thing, but not on a specific one-off. And I do have to remind everyone again about the specifics of the SCOSA report, particularly the bit that says we should be considering reasonable asset sales and apportioning that money against our debt. Sorry.
So that ends the discussion. Okay. You've spoken and we've closed the discussion. What's the question? We've closed the discussion. I mean, make it harder than it should be. So I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? So it is lost. So now we revert back to the original recommendation. Councillor Nicholson, you had a foreshadow motion. Sorry, you did.
Thank you, Worship. I moved the motion with number 5 back in, and I'd like to be really clear that about the wording so that we explore the capacity to redirect revenue generated from this sale towards local land conservation practices in Malang as part of the 25-26 budget considerations, not saying that we will do it, simply that we explore the capacity to do that. And that will be really important for us to consider. If that sale happens and we get revenue, it will be really important for us to consider what we do with that and what projects are in Malang that we need to think about. Well, they've lost that piece of land, or that piece of community land has been sold because it's not required anymore. But is there something else that Malang can gain? And if we do that, it potentially could be a model for other areas in Alexandrina to consider. If a part of their community land is possibly going to sale, that it could actually benefit the community that's very local to it in a way. I'm not speaking tonight saying that I think all of it should go and that this should be a model that is certainly cemented, but I think that it would just be good for us to consider that this time. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder? And we're talking about the original as it was. Councillor Miller? Speaking.
I think the wording is very explicit in 5 that we're just exploring, and that was reflected in the feedback when we did do community consultation.
So is there any further? Councillor Coomans?
Yeah, look, I support it. It seems to me that when you're going out to public consultation and you're saying you're looking to sell something, and then you say to the community we're going to use the money for something totally different in another area, there'll be less chance that the community are going to support it. But at least if you say we're going to consider spending this money in your particular area, then it's got so much better chance of getting through. So it's a no-brainer for me.
Is there any further discussion? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Item 9.16 is the Chief Executive Officer's report, and there's a recommendation that the report for February be received and noted. Is there a mover for that? Move, Councillor Coomans. Seconder, Councillor Oliver. Is there any discussion or questions of Andrew regarding his report? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. 9.17 is, I should have asked you that, sorry. 9.17 is the Council Resolution Register. And there's a recommendation there before you. Andrew, is there anything we need to add to that? Are there any questions for clarity? Councillor Maidment.
On the 15th of 7th, 24, a service review of wooden boats to inform the 25-26 budget discussion, and it hasn't even started, and we're in the budgetary process, so I just wanted to know where that resolution's at. I've got 2 more questions.
These are questions for clarity. That question's part of the debate. You've got to understand what clarity is. So the questions for clarity, you start. Something in there that you may not understand the wording of or what it means, is clarity. The other stuff is part of the debate. So there's a recommendation there. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Gardner. Is there a seconder? Councillor Livingston. Is there any discussion, including questions? Councillor Maidment.
Yes, I'd like to be clear on the 15th of the 7th, 24 resolution that a service review of wooden boats to inform the 25-26 budget would inform that discussion, but it hasn't been started, and is there any reason why that has not occurred?
Thank you. Through the chair. The commencement of the wooden boat service review has essentially been put on hold after Andrew started, and we've looked at a different way of looking at our future service reviews. I'm not sure when the approach for that is being brought to the chamber. However, it's grouped up into all of the ones that were planned, but they were put on hold.
Through the chair, I'm further concerned about the other service reviews that are actually due in this annual business plan and budget period. I'm not sure how it's possible for administration to get on top of all of those service reviews. With the reports that were considered today, there's a significant amount of work there that needs to start again. So I guess I'm flagging that I feel it's going to be impossible to do these service reviews properly and in a meaningful way that considers our community appropriately and brings appropriate financial relief to council. My focus is with the CFO and council members and taking this journey around our long-term financial plan, annual business plan and budget. That's where the benefit will be, and I apologise, but I can't see how it's possible for administration to nail all of these additional service reviews this financial year.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. The ineligible components of the Langon Creek Discovery Trail, I just wondered what they were. I'm happy for it to be on notice.
I think it might have to be on notice. I won't be able to find it quick enough, but I think it was something, sorry, through the chair. I believe it was something to do with the design that they've now said that that's ineligible. Yeah. So it's about, I think it was about $125,000 worth of works out of the $7 million project.
One other question, Your Worship. The Langon Creek Code Amendment that came out of the village conversations, and I know we didn't get the grant funding for, but then it was going to be managed in-house, I thought. I just wanted to check where that was at. I think it's in the budget.
Matt, can you answer that? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair. The Langhorne Creek Code Amendment project was not necessarily a code amendment, it was more about accommodation review within that region. You're quite right, we did apply for grant funding, we were unsuccessful in doing that, and I think the last time we spoke about this in the chamber, my advice was that we would have some capacity to do that work in-house, although it would take us a significantly longer amount of time. We are now looking at some options. The Greater Adelaide Regional Plan was actually released today, so that's now a live document. We'll be looking into what that means for council in terms of having a housing strategy and whether that could form part of the investigations into a broader housing strategy.
Any further discussion? Councillor Scott.
I'm just, sorry, I'm just making sure we're on the resolutions register, are we, or not? That there has, I noticed that there's been some progress with the NAC and joint naming. Could someone please give me an update on that, because that's been around for about 8 years.
Thank you, Matt.
7 years, and it'd be good to hear how that's travelling. Thank you.
Through the chair, we have just in the last few days finalised the draft version of the new naming of roads, reserves and public places policy, which is going to incorporate some of that dual naming, particularly for reserves and public places. We've had initial discussions with Bill Wilson at the Narrandjeri Aboriginal Corporation, and now that we have a finalised draft, we'll be circulating that back to NAC for their board to review. We'll also be doing the same with the Heritage Advisory Committee for the role that they play in the naming of roads, and then we'll be seeking some governance advice around it as well. So fingers crossed, depending on how long those external referrals take, we'd be hopeful of getting that back to the chamber for endorsement, potentially to go out to consultation on it in the next 2 to 3 months.
That's fantastic. Could I just have a follow-up quick question, please? Are you going down the path of the Australian name, the Aboriginal name, and the meaning underneath it? Is that the three things on each sign?
Through the chair, the policy itself and the procedure isn't quite that granular. There is some advice that has informed the policy, and I can't remember which act it was about 2012, I was only looking at it the other day, but it talks about trying to avoid dual names where possible, and that if you're looking at having a traditional name, then that name should take pride of place rather than it being a dual name. It doesn't say that you cannot do it, it's just a recommendation. So I think we'll be seeking that feedback from NAC just to get their take on it before coming back to council.
So is it any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Anybody? That's carried unanimously. Item 10 is committee reports. 10.1 we've already done. 10.2 is a report from the South Australian Wooden Boat Festival Committee regarding the festival ambassador. Stacey, is there anything to change? Are there any questions for clarity on this? Straightforward. So if not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Oh, hang on, sorry. No, I won't. First I'll get a mover. Councillor Oliver. Is there a seconder? Councillor Livingston. Any discussion? So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 11 is council member reports. 11.1 is presiding members report. So that's my report for February. It's a recommendation that we receive in that report with Councillor Livingston. Is there a second? Councillor Oliver. Any discussion or questions to that? So I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Now, also this is not part of my actual report, but something I need to read, so I'll read to you. So, on the last day of February, we received the Essential Services Commission of South Australia ESCOSA report on the Council's financial sustainability. I really don't believe any of us are surprised by the report that found that our current financial performance, based on the draft long-term financial plan that went out for public consultation last year, was unsustainable. Our most recent asset re-evaluation identified a huge increase in the overall value of our assets, resulting in a significant increase in our asset depreciation costs. This reality highlighted the need to reassess our entire operating budget, and we have been doing that. As Mayor, I believe it's prudent for our Audit and Risk Committee to consider and respond to the ESCOSA report before we formally address the report at a council meeting. And we mentioned earlier the committee is looking to convene a special meeting at the end of March. I'd like the committee's response to be presented to council at the April meeting, as then as a council we can decide how to respond. In the interim, I want to take the opportunity to reassure our community that we are already implementing the recommendations set out in the ESCOSA report. We do recognise the need to address the costs associated with servicing the substantial increase in the overall value of our assets, as well as the need to reassess our entire operating budget, and that we need to bring our community along this journey of financial transformation. We have a new Chief Financial Officer, or relatively new, Andrew Alderson, and a new Chief Executive Officer, who's really relatively new now anyway, Andrew McDonald. I think it's fair to say that both the Andrews have brought a significant financial experience to our council. And we have been working closely with both our CFO and CEO to develop a new draft long-term financial plan as part of the draft 2025-26 annual business plan and budget process. I'll stress that what we are doing is a draft at this stage, and council is going to have to exercise financial restraint, which can always be challenging when we have diverse interests across our communities. However, our newly drafted long-term financial plan sees council returning to surplus within 2 years and shows a significant reduction in rates over the first 4 years. Compared to the long-term financial plan that was consulted on with our community, the draft plan shows a 3.25% above CPI rate increase over 4 years, compared to previously in the plan 11%. The community is encouraged to join us in this financial transformation journey. We have 8 budget workshops planned. We've already had 2, and they are open to everyone to come along and observe. Workshop 3 is scheduled for Monday the 24th of March, followed by Workshop 4 on Monday the 31st of March. Formal community consultation will take place in May, when we have a draft annual business plan and budget and draft long-term financial plan to present. I would like to reassure our community that I and our council members are committed to doing all we can to ensure that rates remain affordable for our residents. So I just felt I needed to, given the report and the interest in the report, I think we just needed to clarify that. 11.2 is council member activity report verbal updates. Are there any verbal updates from council members? Councillor Crimmins?
I had a question on your letter, Mayor Parkes, whether you're going to publish that or put it on...
What was that? Sorry?
The letter that you just read to us, what's your plans with it? Are you going to provide that as a media outlet or put it on one of our Facebook things or whatever?
I think we will look at the opportunity. Andrew and I have discussed that, and we will possibly offer it to the media if they wish to run it as a letter to the editor or whatever they want to do with it, given there have been a number of letters to the editor around the ASCOSA plan, and people need to know what we're doing and where we're heading. So are there any updates, Councillor, at the moment?
Yes, I and the other ward councillors are getting a lot of angst from residents on Riverside Road, Strathalbyn, particularly B-doubles cutting through from Dry Plains Road to the 9 Mile. And I was wondering, are they allowed to do that? And they are creating problems for our roads. The residents will be petitioning council at the April meeting, seeking some improvement to the road conditions, but from my intel is that the road is being carved up, corrugated, and obviously lots of dust. And I was just wondering how we get around B-double skirting the township of Strathalbyn in that way.
Yeah, we take it on notice, but I would suggest you would do an email to the General Manager of Infrastructure asking him to see if the road's gazetted for B-doubles and what the damage is doing to it. Is there any other updates of your activities? No? So there's a recommendation that we note the verbal member activity reports where there really aren't any. Councillor Livingston, do you wish to move it yet? Seconder? Councillor Scott? There's nothing to discuss, so I'll put it to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Now we move to item 12, confidential items, so we do need to move into
South Coast Television, your community, your voice.